morning and welcome. Good morning, welcome everyone. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. We're pleased that you're here. We have a hefty agenda today. We're calling the meeting to order. And Amanda, do you have a review of the affidavit?
Good morning, Amanda Swindle at the County Attorney's Office. I have reviewed the affidavit of publication, and it is legally sufficient.
Thank you very much. If you'd all stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This is a public forum, and if you are here to speak on any item that is not on the agenda, this would be your opportunity to speak on a non-agenda item. Is there anyone here for that? Seeing none, we thank you for that. The next item of business is the approval of minutes from our September 23rd meeting. Do we have any comments, motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Our next item of business is item 4A, CPA 2024-00008, Airport Master Plan Update.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
out of an abundance of caution and not having spoke with legal counsel, I'm going to recuse myself from this matter for voting, and I have filed the proper forms with Janet.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Continuing, amend Lee Plan Policy 1.1.12 to update references to the Airport Master Plan as required by the Florida Statutes 163.3177, paren 1, paren B, and 163.3177. Is that a 6 or an 8? Paren 6, paren B4, and policy 47.3.3 to update references to the Board of Port Commissioners. I see we have a speaker at the podium.
Good morning, Katie Wellner, ASP Principal Planner with Lee County. This first case is a county-initiated comprehensive plan amendment to update the references to the Southwest Florida International Airport, that's RSW, their recently adopted airport master plan. The Board of County Commissioners directed staff excuse me, to pursue these amendments in May. So the proposed amendments impact two areas of the comprehensive plan. The first currently references the previous airport master plan update from March of 2004. The second is policy 47.3.3, which does not correctly distinguish between the Board of County Commissioners and the Board of Port Commissioners when discussing the decision-making bodies for the Port Authority. So the proposed amendments fix these references for consistent and correct terminology and information. The amendments specifically amend Lee Plan Policy 1.1.12, which updates the references to the master plan as required by Florida statutes, and also removes some unnecessary acronyms. We are also amending Policy 47.3.3, which updates the reference to the Board of Port Commissioners as the Board of County Commissioners in their capacity as the Port Authority. There are no changes to the airport plan development requirements. The proposed amendments are consistent with Lee Plan Goal 42 and Objective 42.1, which require coordination between intergovernmental entities, including Lee County and the Port Authority. The proposed amendments continue the commitment to the airport's impact on economic development within Lee County, which supports Lee Plan Policy 158.3.2 regarding economic development and diversification. And finally, the amendments are consistent with Florida statutes, which require incorporation of the airport master plan with information on the addition and author in the comprehensive plan. So based on the information provided in the presentation and the staff report, staff has found the proposed amendments to be consistent with the Lee Plan and Florida statutes and recommends that the LPA recommend approval to transmit the proposed amendments. And that's all I have. but we have staff here to answer questions if you have any.
Members of the LPA, we have a member from the public too. If you'll stay at the podium, let's take an initial round of questions and we'll hear from the public. Any questions or comments for the speaker?
I got one.
Yes, Ray.
On page 3 of your submittal information, just above conclusion, it states the proposed amendments are consistent with Florida statutes. The remainder of the Lee plan and do not create internal consistencies with any other goals, objectives, or policies. Is it consistencies or inconsistencies?
Should be inconsistencies. I think that's a typo.
Out of all that information out there, we read.
There's always one.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you, Ray. This is a public hearing. We have Marcia Ellis, if you'd like to speak to the issue.
Is there any way we can get the map back up so that we can see the area? Did you have?
Sufficient?
That's sufficient. We'll go with that. Give me just a second. Good morning, Marcia Ellis for the record. So I do appreciate the recusal, which I feel is appropriate on this vote in respect to adopting the airport plan. So what strikes me is that we have a 20-year lag between the last time it was adopted. It seems to me if you were going to solicit public input and really work with the surrounding neighborhood, now would be the time to do it. Right? If we're talking a 20-year gap. In reviewing this airport, it affects me. I live directly south of the airport. I am a receiver of the flow, and we know that airports have been discovered to be a major contributor of PFAS, and there are concerns in the community for compatibility with the way that this is developed. In fact, when we look at the FAA Advisory Circular 150, they give very clear guidance about the types of low density and conservation uses that are appropriate surrounding the airport. I also have an issue with the Timber Trails property being suggested that will be sold, because that was the one move that I have witnessed or read about the LCPA taking to make sure that the surrounding development is compatible. So that parcel is at the end of Shawnee Road. It was picked up because of noise issues, so that property is now in this report being suggested to be sold because it doesn't meet that criteria of needing to be acquired. The FAA advisory, the 150, is very clear about compatible development and the responsibilities that the dual authority of the commissioners and acting as the LCPA have to make sure that investments, our public investments in the airport, are appropriate and don't increase our risk and liabilities. We don't want increased density around the airport. Other communities are envious of our position of not having those increased liabilities. Let me also say that there's open comment on the extension of the proposal for the runway, and this figures in, it predominates decision-making about how that Alico corridor is being developed and what kinds of interactions and coordination that we have with the surrounding community. So I urge the airport to please follow the guidance of the FAA Circular 150 and work with the surrounding community to get our input moving forward on this and to move that Timber Trails parcel into Conservation 2020. It abuts Conservation 2020 and it absolutely should not be sold. It needs to be put into conservation for the future. Let me also say this is primary panther habitat, and that the very first fatality recorded in Panther Pulse was on right to the north of the airport. So we have obligations to uphold our protections of wildlife as well.
Thank you for those comments, Marcia. Members of the LPA? Members of the LPA, while Janet figures that out, any further remarks or thoughts or comments?
Well, I mean, I guess I have a question about the Timbers property. Is any discussions been had with Conservation 2020 on that?
We'll have staff from the Port Authority answer that question.
My name is Alicia Dixon. I'm the Director of Planning and Environmental Compliance for the Lee County Port Authority. And just want to touch on some of the comments. We have had preliminary discussions with county lands on this. The money that was used to purchase Timber Trails was given by the FAA. So we're required under our federal grants to put that money back into aviation. So we are talking to county lands. There's an application that needs to be submitted. We're planning on talking with them to see if it's something they want to do, but we do have to make sure we get fair market value for it.
No further discussion? Do I hear a motion?
Are there any other comments?
Pardon me?
Any other comments from the
No.
public? I make a motion to recommend forwarding this on and approval.
I have a motion on this item. I have a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item of business is item 4B, referencing CPA 2024-00005 Florida Gulf Coast Business Center. Amend Lee Plan Policy 1.3.4 describing the industrial commercial interchange future land use category to remove the requirement that light industrial uses comprise a minimum of 50% of the total floor area within areas added to this future land use category after January 1, 2007.
Good morning, Paul Taracco here for the record. I'm here to present the Florida Gulf Coast Business Center small-scale text amendment. So Alan Freeman is the applicant and developer. Myself, Paul Taracco, is the land use consultant with Catron, and I also have Ted Treese here to handle the traffic portion of this application. Brief presentation outline. The request is amendment to policy 1.3.4, industrial commercial interchange, to remove the restriction placed in 2007 requiring 50% industrial use to enable more clean, consistent business uses such as office, medical, research, and laboratory uses next to the newly allowed adjacent multifamily. Lee County staff found the request consistent with Lee Plan and recommends transmittal. The area location map, the project is located on the east side of Three Oaks Parkway, north of Alico Road. The Lee Plan use description, the applicant is requesting to amend the text of the future land use category of industrial commercial interchange to remove the restriction placed in 2007 requiring 50% industrial use to enable more clean, consistent business uses such as office, medical, research, and laboratory uses next to the newly allowed adjacent multifamily. Policy 1.3.4 will be amended as follows. The industrial commercial interchange areas are designated to permit a mixture of light industrial and/or commercial uses. This category does not permit heavy industrial use. Within areas expanded beyond the existing industrial commercial interchange boundaries, retail commercial uses will be limited to 20% of the total floor area. The last sentence will be struck. This change in text is consistent with the following Lee Plan policies, goals, and objectives. Utilities, the property falls in the Lee County Utilities, Potable Water, and Sanitary Sewer Future Service Area. LCU will have the capacity to serve the project according to the 2023 concurrency. Potable water for the proposed project is 250 gallons per day. Available capacity is 316. Sewer is 200, and available capacity is 253. Surface water drainage basin, the site is master permitted with South Florida, and it's within the 6 Mile Slough drainage basin. Parks, recreation, open space. Three Oaks Community Park is located 2 miles to the south of the site. On-site open space will be required per LDC. Recreational amenities may be incorporated into the site as provided by the employers. One example is Scotland Logistics Services, which has basketball courts and a walking paths within its future land use. Public schools, there are no increase in population. Proposed with the text amendment, therefore, no additional classrooms will be required. Adjacent local government and its comprehensive plan. The subject property is located within the unincorporated portion of Lee County. Policy 1.6.1 Airport Noise Zone. The proposed location, according to the Port Authority, falls under Airport Noise Zone C. The recorded plat has a required notice for Airport Protection Zone outlined in Section 34. Objective 2.1 development location. The property is located in an urban infill area adjacent to I-75 and just north of Alico Road, fronting Three Oaks Parkway. The area is part of a contiguous and compact growth pattern and contains all urban services, including complete public utility service. Objective 2.2 development timing. The property is located in an urban area with adequate public facilities and is part of an infill location, creating a compact and contiguous development. This is an existing developing business park surrounded by an adequate road network and nearby housing in the area for the workers planned for these office, professional, and commercial uses. This amendment will allow the restoration of some of the commercial uses lost when the Vintage Commerce Center and Alico Crossroads were converted from industrial commercial to general interchange with a reduction of approximately 40 acres of commercial uses converted to multifamily. Policy 2.2.1, rezoning development of regional impact. This property is already zoned for existing and planned uses, and it's adjacent to an extensive roadway network. Sewer, water, EMS, fire, and police protection are all available. This amendment will also enhance the look and visual image of the buildings on the site from I-75 and Three Oaks Parkway due to the high visibility along this corridor. This amendment will allow for a reduction of large footprint industrial and warehouse buildings on the site and replace them with attractive office, research, and medical buildings. Objective 2.3, future land use map amendments. This text amendment is being requested due to new information and changed conditions as described in Objective 2.3 of the LEAP plan. Lee County has reclassified the adjacent properties to the south to general interchange land use category, allowing multifamily housing adjacent to this property. Our request will continue employment-based business use on our property while reducing the amount of light industrial now required directly adjacent to this multifamily. Objective 2.5, historical resources. After a thorough assessment, there are no historical elements on the site. Policy 6.1.4, commercial development. Current future land use designation permits commercial development, and the proposed text amendment aims to enhance this allowance by enabling additionally commercial development. Policy 6.1.5, maintain land development regulations. The proposed text amendment is in an area where capacity exists on the adjacent roadway network. We'll discuss the transportation in the next few slides. Policy 7.1 industrial property is well suited to meet the aforementioned standards. The proposed mixed-use development, which includes light industrial, commercial, and office spaces, is expected to enhance compatibility with the residential areas to the north and south. Goal 11, mixed use. The property is providing a high-wage employment center to the surrounding residential communities and is part of a mixed-use development, creating greater connectivity between housing, workplaces, and retail businesses with reduced trip length and various transportation options. Three Oaks Parkway connects this development to the south all the way to Radio Road in Collier County and will soon connect northward to Daniels Parkway in Lee County. Objective 11.1, mixed-use development. This text amendment encourages mixed-use development on this industrial commercial interchange property while providing for a wider range of uses, including higher concentrations of office, medical, healthcare, research, and development facilities on property with high visibility from Three Oaks Parkway and from I-75. This employment center will provide a variety of job opportunities to the surrounding communities of San Carlos Park, Three Oaks, as well as those living in the wider Lee County areas of Corkscrew Road, Gateway, and Lehigh. Lee County has a planned future roadway extensions of Alico Road to the east and Three Oaks Parkway to the north to enhance the connectivity of this site to several hubs of Lee County. 36.1.4, protect the traffic. In both the approved and proposed trip generation analysis, the peak occurred in the weekday PM timeframe. The total PM peak hour increases from 1288 to 1339, which is a total of 51 additional trips. The PM peak hour has a 3.9% increase from previously approved conditions. This will not impact any of the adjacent roadway networks or level of service of any of the surrounding roadways. Bicycle pedestrian network. The current pedestrian network is well established. 53.1, acceptable levels of potable water service. We already discussed that Lee County has the capacity to serve the project. 56.1, acceptable levels of sanitary sewer. As discussed, Lee County Utilities has the availability to serve the project. 158.2.1, allocate adequate land on the future land use map. Having a balance of commercial, office, research, and supporting retail uses at this location will provide enhanced workplace and job opportunities while improving consistency with the recent land use changes to the south, allowing residential uses in this area. This property provides for a visual pleasing transition from I-75 with corporate headquarters, laboratories, research, and medical office between Three Oaks Parkway and I-75, while providing sufficient light industrial manufacturing, distribution, and warehousing to the west along Oriole Road corridor and to the west. This will add diversification to a typical industrial subdivision while providing more appropriate use adjacent to the recently approved residential zoning. It will also help to provide for the existing and projected medical and healthcare needs for the residential communities in this area. The project will continue to meet appropriate commercial architectural standards, proper open space, and appropriate buffering. This text amendment will continue the mixed-use business activity at this location while recognizing the changing character of the location in close proximity to the recently added residential uses. It will focus on cleaner business uses with less industrial truck traffic while recognizing that providing additional employment opportunities in proximity to residential areas seek to integrate home and work life in order to promote the high quality of family life desired in Lee County. Going through the transportation, what you're seeing on the screen right now is the current approved land uses along with the approved external trip generation tables. The next slide is the proposed. As you can see, there's very minimal increases. And then in conclusion, the text amendment to Lee County is appropriate change for this property. The property is currently zoned for the commercial, office, research, laboratory, medical, and light industrial uses contemplated by the industrial commercial land use category. And these uses promote a diverse economy. While the industrial commercial interchange category is in place on the north side of Alico, on the east and west sides of I-75, this is the only property affected by this text change, as it is the only property added after 2007. The text amendment proposed will only enhance the development by removing the restriction on substantial industrial development to allow for more compatible and visually pleasing uses next to the interstate and the multifamily properties. Development of the property has all requisite public urban services and will not have negative environmental or transportation impacts and will not negatively impact historical resources in Lee County. The proposed text amendment simply confirms the Lee Pan policy objective of providing additional high-wage job to the residents of the area of Lee County. The proposed amendment is consistent with and implements several policies in the Lee Plan. The text amendment does not increase density or intensity, does not underutilize public resources or infrastructure, does not reduce open space, buffering, landscaping, or preservation areas, and does not otherwise adversely impact the surrounding properties. For these reasons, the proposed amendment should be approved. I will pass this off to the applicant, Alan Freeman, to give a brief discussion of why we're here today. That one good?
For the record, Alan Freeman. I'm not here to prolong your day. I'm only here to increase my visibility. Just wanted to be here to answer any questions. Ted Treese is here to answer any technical transportation questions. The main thrust of this is that we look at this as a 650-acre, basically industrial commercial park along Alico Road, going a mile north of Alico Road. In that park, there are substantial industrial uses, going light industrial from the west toward the interstate, retail along Alico primarily, and along the interstate. We decided to do an office park that we thought was more visually compatible and would provide for those uses. So that's what this is. In 2007, I guess somebody determined that we should have a lot of industrial on that site, that 80-acre site, as opposed to that 650-acre site. So in a holistic manner, this is a substantial amount of industrial with some office backdrop along the interstate, retail, so it is the ultimate mixed-use development. and along the interstate and the interchange, the county has already rezoned those areas and made comp plan changes to general interchange. There's an existing Centro Apartments, 256 apartments, and there's an upcoming another 400 or so apartments by Stock Development. So we're trying to integrate the closeness of the workforce and residential multifamily, not single family, multifamily, with the various few million square feet of industrial here that's east of Amazon. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those. And if there are any transportation questions, Ted will tell you it doesn't really affect the network much, but this was primarily for the uses along the interstate. If you know where this is, there's a large neogenomics facility, 150,000 square feet. Adjacent to that, France Eye Care, and adjacent to that, we brought in Scotland Logistics, another 60,000 square feet. So that this is that property with those uses.
Questions for Alan? None at this time. Thank you. And
Thank you very much for your attention. Appreciate it.
this will be your equivalent of public input at that time, so thank you. Staff?
Good morning, Brandon Dunn with the Lee County Planning Section. Here this morning to talk about Florida Gulf Coast Business Center, CPA 24-00005. This is a privately initiated text amendment. The applicants already went through this in pretty good detail, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this, but did want to cover staff's recommendation. As the applicant stated, this is to amend policy 1.3.4 to remove the limitation of the minimum requirement for 50% industrial within this future land use category. As the applicant had also stated, this is the only portion of the land use category, the commercial industrial land use category, that does have this limitation on it. The portions along Alico Road do not have that limitation and allow for freely to choose between retail, commercial, or light industrial uses. This is the policy that's going to be amended. It removes the 50% required for light industrial uses. It does not increase the percent of allowable retail uses, and that was something that was important to staff. We wanted to make sure that this continued to serve as a good employment location with light industrial or office corporate type uses. Medical office is what's in there now, so that's a good type of use in there. As the applicant said, staff did find this consistent with the Lee plan. Policy 159.1.2 supports high growth businesses. This does allow for continued development of this development with high growth businesses. Policy 1.6.1 is airport noise zones. This does not allow or add any uses that would be incompatible with the airport noise zones. We found it could be consistent with that. Objective 158.2 is to maximize employment opportunities. Again, this is kind of in line with this will help maximize the uses there. In our previous conversations with Economic Development Office about this corridor, it was pointed out to us that based on the uses that were going in there, it would be unlikely to expect industrial uses to go in there at the cost point that these properties are getting. So allowing for this corporate office type use will maximize employment opportunities in this location. Policy 160.3.1 talks about co-location of these high demand uses in close proximity to FGCU and other places of higher education and public services. And as the applicant went over in great detail, public services are available with no level of public service issues. That being said, staff found this to be consistent with the original intent of the 1989 Lee Plan and also maintains the ordinance of 07-10, providing that limitation of industrial was done partially to limit traffic along this corridor. The types of uses they are proposing to do, which don't include retail, will continue to limit the traffic along the corridor. The use is also compatible with existing and planned uses within the development and also surrounding the development. As I previously said, it is limited to the property that we're talking about here. This doesn't have any external impacts or will change any other properties. And finally, it's consistent with Lee County's economic development element. Staff recommends that the BOCC transmit the proposed amendment as provided in Attachment 1. And staff is available for questions.
Anything for Brandon? Brandon, is this the only industrial commercial interchange?
You can see here, this is the future land use map. So this color is this color. So there are other industrial commercial future interchanges, but they do not have that limitation of the 20% retail max or the a requirement of 50% industrial uses.
While it eliminates the requirement, it doesn't preclude industrial uses.
You are right. It does not preclude industrial uses.
I have no further questions. Thank you. Mr. Freeman has already spoken as a matter of public. I have no other cards on this matter, so I go back to the LPA.
I think with Three Oaks being extended through here, maximizing the employment opportunities is really what's key here. Allowing more of the medical and large office complexes. I'm in support of it, and what a unique thing to have one property with only this limitation on it. Thank you.
I was just curious if there are any plans for improvement on the section of road that does fail on Alico between Oriole and US 41.
Staff?
There is nothing currently planned for that section.
No questions? Happy to make a motion.
Okay.
It's become an employment corridor. I think staff and the applicant's done a tremendous job. It's a great location.
Yeah, I support the idea. I think it's a great idea. Like, in fact, it doesn't preclude, doesn't require. This is a great piece. All right, having no further discussion, do I hear a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion to recommend transmittal of this project, CPA 2024-00005.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Don. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 4C. It is CPA 2024-00007. House Bill 1379, update. Amend Lee plan to implement House Bill 1379. House Bill 1379 is a wide-ranging amendment to Florida statutes related to environmental protection in the areas of wastewater management, septic systems, sanitary sewer services and planning, basin management action plans, and the wastewater grant program. Amendments to the Lee plan are required to maintain consistency with Florida statutes. Additional minor amendments have also been identified to update cross-references to various county ordinance and plans. I see we have a large number of speakers, and we welcome that. We're glad you're here. We thank you for taking time. Many of you may be missing work, and we recognize the importance of you doing that. In fairness to all parties, the public comments, which we are not at yet, you have a 3-minute limit, so please organize your thoughts, and when we get there, we'll start calling you up. And we have the applicant.
Good morning to members of the LPA and members of the public in attendance this morning. Brian Roberts for the Planning Section, Lee County Community Development. I'll be presenting CPA 2024-7. This is a county-initiated text amendment for the House Bill 1379 amendments. House Bill 1379 was passed on May 3rd, 2023, and effective July 1st, 2023. Staff was given direction to proceed with the amendments to the Lee Plan to maintain consistency on May 7th, 2024. Staff analysis of the amended statutes resulted in 8 changes to statutes that would require amendments to the Lee Plan to maintain consistency. These include impacts to installation of new septic systems in BMAP areas, prioritization of waste treatment, advanced waste treatment, and required a feasibility to serve sanitary sewer to developments of more than 50 lots with more than one septic system per 1 acre. These next slides are going to follow the staff report format with the required Florida statute, followed by the staff analysis. Florida statute now requires that capital improvement plans show projects necessary to achieve pollutant load reductions attributed to Lee County and BMAP areas. As of December 31st, 2021, Lee County has achieved a total reduction of 249% of its attributable load, of total nitrogen in the Caloosahatchee Estuary BMP. There's currently one ongoing project within the Everglades West Coast BMAP. That's the Lake Parks Phase 3 project, and that's currently included in the CIP tables in Table 3 of the Lee Plan. There are 3 other projects within the Caloosahatchee Estuary, and those are also currently included in Table 3. So there are no amendments required to meet this statute requirement. The bottom middle picture there, I want to point out, shows the 2 BMAP areas, the blue being the Caloosahatchee Estuary and the purplish color being the Everglades West Coast. And you can see it covers a significant portion of Lee County. That'll be important later with some of the changes. Florida statute, Florida statute was further amended to require the sanitary sewer element of local comprehensive plans to prioritize advanced waste treatment. Staff is recommending policy changes to policy 56.1.3 to include the words "with priority given to advanced waste treatment." Oh, I went backwards. Florida statute now requires local governments to determine the feasibility of providing sanitary sewer services to 50 or more residential lots, built or unbuilt, with more than one septic system per 1 acre, and determine the feasibility of providing sanitary sewer services within a 10-year planning horizon. To meet this requirement, staff is recommending amendments to objectives 18.3, policies 1.4.1, 1.4.3, 2.1.1, 18.3.1, and 20.3.1. These amendments are recommended to accommodate possible future expansion of services that may be required to convert portions of these areas from septic to centralized sewer. Staff is also recommending the addition of policies 56.2.3 and Table 6. Table 6 is identified as the 10-year sanitary sewer feasibility plan and includes the supporting data required in the Florida statute. And policy 56.2.3 identifies the statutory requirement for Table 6 and the criteria for the inclusion in the Lee Plan. I'm going to talk in a little more detail about Table 6 and its development. It was created after a detailed mapping and identification process to locate areas within the county that were subject to the statute. It identifies the areas and includes the data and determined the feasibility of serving those areas within a 10-year planning horizon. At the completion of this process, it identified 84 areas within Lee County that meet the state statute requirements, and again included all the additional data in the requirements. This is a larger blow-up of what was in your staff report on page 7. Gives you an idea of where these areas are located, and if you remember the BMAP areas, you can see how that kind of overlaps some of these areas where these sanitary sewer services are as well. I just wanted to give you an idea of where these areas are located. As a result of amendments in House Bill 1379, Florida statute now prohibits the installation of new on-site sewer treatment and disposal systems, call them septic systems, within a BMAP, and again, a large portion of Lee County, where connection to a publicly owned or investor-owned sewage system is available. Additionally, on lots of 1 acre or less in a BMAP, it requires an enhanced nutrient removal septic system. The staff is recommending amendments to standard 4.1.2 to add numbers 7 and 8 to maintain consistency with this requirement. The picture shows a form of advanced treatment system, an aerobic treatment unit. FDEP does the permit and enforcement of septic systems, and it's not done by Lee County, and they maintain a list of approved septic systems that meet that nutrient removal requirement. State statute now requires a local government subject to a BMAP or not meeting nutrient or nutrient standards to provide annual reporting of the status of construction of the sanitary sewer systems to those areas within a BMAP. Staff is recommending policy 62 or 56.2.2 to require this annual reporting. Slide 9, the next two, 6 and 7 of the Florida statutes go together. This and the beginning of the next slide, they work together to require sewage disposal systems to provide advanced waste treatment prior to discharge into water bodies that are currently or will be determined to not be meeting nutrient or nutrient-related standards or subject to nutrient or nutrient-related BMAPs. Again, a large portion of Lee County. Staff recommends policy 56.1.8 and 56.1.9 here on the next page to address those requirements. And those policies read similar to the statute requirements and include the dates from the statute in the policy. Final change, renamed the wastewater grant to the water quality improvement grant. Expanded and revised the grant to include additional types of projects aimed at reducing nutrient loading. Staff recommends policy 125.1.9 to encourage the use of this grant that's available through FDEP. In conclusion, the proposed amendments will maintain consistency with state statute, maintain internal consistency, provide planning tools for future expansion of sanitary sewer aimed at protecting the environment. Staff recommends transmittal of the proposed amendments as provided in attachment 1 and stands by for any questions.
Any questions from the applicant? Anybody? So this is a state mandated.
Yes, these changes are all based on state statute amendments and new state statutes. And these changes to the Lee plan are based on those state statutes to maintain consistency with those statutes.
And I read here on page 4 of 8 in the staff report, the change to policy 18.3.1, saying no landowner will be required to connect to central sewer or water utilities or be assessed for same unless a threat to public health can be documented, or if a new development proposes an intensity that exceeds the thresholds and standards 4.1.1 and 4.1.2, and then the new language, or if required by state statute. Could you expand on that a little bit as to what that really means to somebody that isn't connected to central sewer and water and doesn't want to be?
If they're not currently connected on a septic system, there isn't a state requirement that will make them connect to or go off of that septic system currently. This is being added that in the future, if there is a state requirement, then that will have to happen. But there is no current requirement for them to abandon the septic system and go to a central system.
Certainly, but should this be adopted and the nutrient levels are in excess of that property owner would be forced to connect to the then available?
If the state statute required it, yes. And the county would have to require that as well, if it was required in the state statute, to maintain that consistency.
Is there any financial consideration given to that property owner that may not have the wherewithal to do that?
I believe there's FDEP grants that may be available for conversion, and I would bump that to Nathan Beals with Utilities to see if there's any individual grants available to homeowners. I'm not aware of those.
And the term grant to me means you don't have to pay it back.
May mean that. I'm not aware of specifics.
Nathan, would you like to give some color to this?
I'll do my best. Nathan Beals, Lee County Utilities. What Brian's talking about is there are some opportunities for funding and grants from different resources that may be available, but as of right now, we're not proposing any required connections based on this or anything like that, but we don't have any funding sources lined up necessarily, if that answers your question. It's a state mandate that we have to do these updates and do this table, basically. That is why we're here. It's not that we want to do this. We're just trying to make sure we stay within the requirements.
Sure, and I fully yield to that. Was just the question, is there any financial assistance to those in case this were to happen that were against their will forced to connect to help them do that without encumbering them financially?
It would have to be dependent on when it occurs, if it occurs.
But if
Right now, I'm not aware of anything beyond just DEP and district grants that might be available for current landowners, depending on their situation, if they qualify for grant funding. I know that there are grants that the utilities are using and other municipalities are using to offset costs, and that may be looked at before we move forward with anything. I can tell you there's a project that's out for design right now of designing septic to sewer that we have a grant funding for, but the construction's not funded and we don't have it in our budget to do it. We're just doing it because of the grant funding and because of the requirements to do something.
Does this information allow somebody that is maybe on a septic system and the state now requires that they improve that to instead connect? Could they elevate the technology of the system that they are now functioning with? I'm advised over a series of these meetings that the septic disposal technology is now elevated like everything else.
Parts of the change statute do require the installation of advanced septic systems where connection to a investor-owned or public utility is not available in the BMAP, and those are enhanced nutrient reducing septic systems, and I believe it's 65% of total nitrogen is removed in addition to what a standard septic system achieves. It achieves that above a standard septic system.
So if municipal, in my terminology, were available, they would have to connect. If it weren't and they were failing, they would have to upgrade what they have.
That's within the BMAP areas, if you're less than an acre. If you're over an acre, you're still able to use a standard septic system. When we looked at these, we kind of looked at it as a septic density. If you're one septic system per acre, if you exceed that and you don't have connection, you go to the advanced septic system or the nutrient reducing septic system. And that's the way the map was created, and we went through that 8 or 9 step process. It's in the staff report. And but where a connection is currently available and you're within a BMAP or a nutrient related area that's failing, you have to connect to those septic systems now under the or to the central sewer under the state.
So if you're in a BMAP, if you have more than one system per acre, and if there's those utilities available, so those 3 filters have to occur before that homeowner's has to connect. You're in a BMAP, you have more than one unit per, more than one system per acre, And municipal services are available.
Well, the catch is the municipal services available, or investor-owned services are available. If those are available and you're in those areas, you have to connect.
BMAP, or you have more than one.
And then the septic density kicks in the BMAP areas.
Okay. Anything else, Dawn?
In attachment 1, page 404, policy 56.2.3, I was just hoping for some clarification. It doesn't seem to read the same as the Florida statute. In here it says, the county will assess the feasibility of providing central sewer services to areas on septic when more than 50 on-site sewage treatment or disposal systems are located at more than 1 per acre. But in the statute, it says with more than one on-site sewage treatment and disposal system per 1 acre. I just wanted clarification, make sure that that's saying the same thing, because it's a little off for me.
We can look at that and work with our attorneys to make sure that it's
Okay.
a one-for-one or an equivalent type language, but that is our intent, is to just implement the state statutes.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a little bit of a follow-up to Stan, maybe some of your concerns. So, Brian, you mentioned 84 areas, but looking at the lots, those are just large areas. Really, we're talking about like 130,000 lots, right?
Well, Lehigh is.
Yeah, it really knocks it up there, right?
And that was classified as one area. I don't have the lot count. We do have it on the map. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I mean, San
But
Carlos
it's a lot, it's a lot of lots.
6,000, Suncoast is 1,500. I can't imagine that the board wouldn't figure out some kind of incentive program if the state did implement something and they had 150,000 lot owners.
This is a
that had to
10-year
take on
feasibility of service.
Right.
There's no requirement yet to implement the services in that 10-year window. And it's important to remember that 20 or so of these lots were identified previously in the, have to page to it here, in the countywide wastewater management plan that ranked the septic service areas for service. So 20 of these 84 areas have previously been identified. And we used that, we didn't look at that and identified the areas and then cross-referenced them to make sure we caught everything.
But you have to start somewhere with the data, and I know this was a lot.
It was a long process.
It was a lot of work, yeah, and I commend staff on the exercise.
Yeah, that's an impressive piece of mapping, the filtering and.
You can thank Sophie in the back row back there.
Okay, good job. Yeah, that's a nice piece of mapping. Okay, if the LPA has no more questions of the county, then at this time, we're going to open this up for public comment. Again, okay, all right. All right, well, I'll keep time on my chronograph as well. Okay. Again, we welcome you, we thank you, and we ask for your input, and I have been asked to start with Don Blackburn. Don Blackburn, if you'd like to ascend to the dais, and then after that, if on deck to keep things moving, Jeff Gray. Jeff, if you could be in the on deck circle. Sure, just have Janet just fill out a card. So at the lectern would be Don Blackburn, and following him would be Jeff Gray. And when Janet's organized, you ready? Yes. Mr. Blackburn, the floor is yours.
Okay, my name's Don Blackburn, and I'm here for the, well, first of all, I'm a board member on the Buckingham Community Association. Okay, that was formed in 1991. It's been active ever since then. 1991 is when our Rural Community Preserve Comprehensive Plan was established, and our association and the residents in Buckingham have been active for 33 years. So that's why we're here, or why I'm here. I don't understand why the language in our comp plan section for the rural community preserve is we're saying that it needs to be removed, where we have language in that it says no central sewer system shall be put in Buckingham for the purposes of discouraging development. That's been in the language for 33 years. We don't want it removed, and I don't understand why there's a proposal to remove it when we do not meet the criteria that's in Statute 163 and 1379 to have it removed. Lot size in Buckingham is a minimum 1 acre, okay? No road easements, no utilities, a gross 1 acre. Density is 1 unit per acre. So that meets the criteria that the gentleman just talked about that's in the statute and in the House bill. So we should be exempt from this proposal. And I'm here to find out why it's in there and can we take it out?
Any further comments?
Well, I'd like to know why. I mean, a lot of residents have taken their time to come down here. I've taken my time to come down here, and it doesn't meet the criteria that it should even be proposed to be deleted. I want to know why is it proposed to be deleted when it does not meet the criteria?
I understand your question.
Okay.
We are not the people to answer that question. The staff is who would answer that question. I've made a note of your question.
Okay.
And let's hear the composite of information, and maybe staff can respond to this in this meeting, or if not, afterwards.
Okay.
All right? Thank you for your remarks.
Okay, and I understand that. I just was trying to let you all that doesn't maybe know about Buckingham, how it began and what we went through and everything. And yeah, I was primarily talking to staff or whoever it was involved that decided that in Buckingham we need to take that section out. Thank you.
It's an excellent question. Thank you for bringing it today. Mr. Gray, Jeff Gray is next, followed by Susan Allen. Okay, so Mr. Gray, you passed. Susan Allen, followed by Terry Pack.
Hello, my name is Susan Allen, and I live in Alva, Florida. Included in the Bayshore Community Plan is policy 18.3.1, which states that no landowner will be required to connect to central sewer or water utilities or be assessed for same unless the threat of public health can be documented, or if a new development proposes an intensity that exceeds the thresholds in standards 4.1.1 and 4.1.2, or if required by state statute. We cannot find that language in many of the other rural community plans. We ask that the future utilities hookup requirements be clarified for all residents in rural areas before this amendment proceeds any further, or that this language be added to all of the rural community plans. Otherwise, any increase in density due to availability of water and sewer in rural areas of Lee County will violate the intent of a number of Lee County policies and objectives and be in complete contrast to what the current community plans represent. Let's make it clear that this is really not in its basis about water and sewer. It's about density. That's what they want. And I was just, when we were talking a minute ago about hooking up to sewer, I just pulled up online, this is from EFC Estimate Florida Consulting, on how much it costs to hook up to sewer for 100 feet. Now, I'm about 200, maybe 200 or more feet from where the main line is proposed in our community. Just as an example, permits and inspections can run up to $2,600 per 100 feet. Water connection fees, $6,500 per 100 feet. Sewer connection fees, $7,150 per 100 feet. Trenching and evacuation, $13,000 per 100 feet. Plumbing costs, $6,500 per 1,000 feet or 100 feet. Total cost estimate would be $35,750 if you're 100 feet away. I'm 200 feet away. I'm on a fixed income. I'm a retired nurse. I don't have $60,000, $70,000 in my back pocket. And actually, we have great water. We have a reverse osmosis system. We love our water. We have a relatively new septic system, which my understanding is new septic systems are, you can practically drink the water after they go through them. They're perfectly safe. Older systems, yes, need to be maintained, but new construction, new septic systems should not be a problem. And this is really about increasing density. Our community cannot afford to be forced to hook up to water or sewer. This is about density. We ask and we plead as a community that you would do the right thing and prevent this future overdevelopment from happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
I just realized one thing. I'm so sorry. I wanted to be on the beach, so just wait a second. There's just two options. Hold on. That's it. All right.
Terry Pack, followed by Carl Kropp.
Good morning. My name's Terry Pask. I live on Duke Highway in the North Olga planning area. Thank you guys for your service. I know a lot of what you do is thankless. I want to state that I disapprove of the proposed changes to the Lee County comprehensive plan. Don't fix something that's not broken. The community plan has worked well for a long, long time, and making blanket changes for the whole county goes against our area of the comprehensive plan. What we need is more protections, not less. So I hope that the language is reconsidered. I don't want to say take it all out, but let's massage it a little bit. This Bill 1379 smacks as government interference with the local areas, and it has the optics of, at least in our area, of collusion with the developers, because they're changing this language makes it easier to put in water and sewer. That water and sewer is going to bring in more development, and we live in a rural area. We don't need more development. All it does is add dollars to the developers' pockets. Susan has stolen my thunder, and I thank you for bringing it up earlier, that the cost of hooking up to these centralized systems is exorbitant. I live on a fixed income. I'm retired. Most of the houses in our area are significantly sent back from the road where the water and sewer is going to be, and the cost is going to be in tens of thousands of dollars. And I can't afford that. Let's not put the horse before the cart. If there's going to be grants or some kind of relief, get that system in place first before we go ahead with putting in all these sewer systems. And despite all the assurances we have that we're not going to be forced to hook up, history tells us a different story. If the sewer is in place, people that have been there for years and years and years are going to eventually be forced to connect to it. And they're going to say, well, we need to support the services that we're offering, and we're doing you a favor by increasing your services. I have good water. I have good septic. You're not increasing the value of my property at all. So it's really all I have to say. Thank you for your time, and thank you for consideration of this matter.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate your comments. Carl Kropp, followed by Dennis Everly.
Can we pause until the gentleman sits down and the noise quiets? It's almost a distraction.
I think it's this person, not the people even. Go ahead, Mr. Prop.
Hello. I live in Buckingham, and I moved there because of the requirement for every house to be over an acre net. And everybody keeps talking about over an acre, and they're talking gross. We're talking net. I mow the darn thing. I know how big it is, and I know people have bigger bigger lots. As long as that it's only the areas like Lehigh and I guess the Cape, where you have much more density than, one house per net acre, then I understand, you have a septic tank right next to your neighbor's septic tank, but we don't need it in Buckingham. Buckingham should be excluded, shall we say, from this, because that's the whole idea for living out there in the lovely country. And on that, I'll say thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you for coming today. Dennis Eberly? Denise, followed by Marcia Ellis.
Okay. Denise Eberly, resident of Alva. This amendment is a blatant attempt to promote urban sprawl in our rural communities, serving special interests rather than the residents who live there. It is being grossly manipulated to benefit developers, and it's clear this is not the best interest of rural communities. Who is this amendment truly benefiting? It's certainly not the people of rural areas. This amendment is a backdoor attempt to increase density in rural areas. The amendment circumvents our land development code and the rural and the future land use community planning goals adopted by the county. The rural areas were intentionally excluded from the urban future land use to protect and preserve our communities from overdevelopment, wasteful spending, and urban sprawl. Our community planning goals, specifically goals 27, 28, and 29 of the Lee Plan, call for maintaining rural areas as agricultural zones. Goal 27, which applies to Northeast Lee County, emphasizes working with residents and property owners. This amendment disregards the goal, pushing through preferences for developers who don't even own the land in most cases. The residents of North Olga and Alva have been, have been trying to work with both the county and developers to uphold the community plan. I am strongly opposed to this amendment. It threatens the character and lifestyle of our rural communities, what makes us choose to live here. It is our property rights at stake, and we, the people, should have a say in what happens in our communities. With all due respect, the government does not have the right to make decisions for us. Furthermore, I want to bring up clustering. The term clustering in rural communities was never intended to meet 8 to 10 homes on 1 acre. The concept is being misrepresented and abused, and it needs to be revised. It is a misnomer. And finally, we ask that you respect and support the rural communities of Lee County, help preserve the last remaining jewel of the county for its beauty for our children and the future. The proposal is incompatible with the rural community and surrounding agricultural areas. And also to just bring up what Susan brought up, it is 300 feet from the road to my property. And so I just want to bring, how much time do I have left? Oh, okay. Well, I wanted to bring up clustering, and I would like that to be revised and revisited and to be more compatible with the rural communities rather than lumping it in with urban. That's all. Thank you.
Marcia, followed by
Slide 16.
Marcia, followed by Stephen Watkins. Stephen, next.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Marcia Ellis, for the record. Appreciate the opportunity to speak about this. And we're going to take a look at this map again because we sort of have a bit of a Cinderella complex going here because we're trying to put a
15.
one size, the map, 16, a one size fits all. We're trying to cram all of Cinderella's stepsister's shoes into the glass, or feet into the glass slipper here because this is not a one size fits all solution. We have got to really get realistic and make some priorities about how we're going to approach and tackle the problem of sewage in our county. For instance, I'm assuming this is San Carlos Park right here. All right, so they have drinking water. They have a public supply of drinking water. They have private septic systems. That's very different from out in Lehigh Acres, where we have quarter-acre lots where people have exceptions and variances to basically build right next to their neighbors' septic systems, and they're drinking water that is unsafe. And we're talking about not just nutrient pollution here. We're talking about PFAS, and we're talking about other contaminants in an area that has a central urban density and increasing density and an unsafe level of infrastructure serving the county's greatest population of children, our future. And that's the risk that we're exposing those families to. We're exposing the children to those risks. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to go to a conference and then have to talk about and share maps of the level of density that we're exposing children to in our community. All right? And we should not be looking for a glass slipper or a silver bullet to fix this problem. We have to prioritize the health of Lehigh Acres, those children who are living out there, and do something about this problem. We don't need to be spending money urbanizing our rural areas, because we need varied land uses in our community, and we need varied housing types as we approach a more holistic solution. So the levels of service that are typical in rural areas are of low density, and the people have moved out there to enjoy a rural lifestyle that is free of government interference, with working systems that they have chosen and invested their money into so that they can enjoy that lifestyle. This shouldn't be a backdoor to sneaking into communities and intensifying those uses. Let me also say that there's a correlation between the nutrients and the PFAS. So anytime we're talking about 65% reduction, I don't know what the technologies do with the septic that's going in, but we need to look at that. We need to be responsive to emerging crises. Whenever we are making these mega plants that we're trying to force people onto, we have so many inputs that are going into these systems that we need to target. We need to be thinking smaller working systems rather than these mega systems, silver bullets and glass slippers.
Thank you, Marcia. Stephen Brodkin, followed by Alan Klingensmith.
Hello, my name is Stephen Brodkin. I'm here representing the concerned citizens of Bayshore community. In our view, the language within the LEAD plan policies 1.4.1 and 1.4.3 regarding the rural land use category stating that these areas are not programmed to receive urban-type capital improvements, and they can anticipate a continued level of public service below that of the urban areas, that language should not be deleted from the LEAD plan. Within policy 1.4.1, rural is defined as low-density residential, agricultural uses, and minimal non-residential land uses that are needed to serve the rural community. For areas that are truly rural, low-density residential is not financially feasible to provide sewer service. Therefore, deletion of that part of policy 1.4.1 and 1.4.3 is not warranted. Back during the period of the EAR, if some of you remember that, the evaluation and appraisal report, which was quite a while ago, there was a strong push from residents in rural areas to protect the rural lifestyle and establish an urban-rural boundary. Many public meetings were held, and there was very good attendance from the public. At that time, the county identified 4 major issues, one of which was community character. Since then, the county dropped the EAR, unfortunately, and took a different direction. It started by requiring developments to be clustered. Clustered developments are not consistent with the rural lifestyle. Residents in clustered developments cannot keep horses, cows, goats, etc. on their properties. Clustered developments are pieces of suburbia dropped into rural areas and lead to the eventual destruction of rural areas. Next, the county started allowing more than 1 dwelling unit per acre within the areas designated as rural, with a recent application allowing 1.4 dwelling units per acre. Now the county wants to bring sewer service to rural areas. As already stated, if an area is designated as rural, it shouldn't be so dense as to make sewer service financially feasible. Again, policy 1.4.1 with regard to residences describes rural as low-density residential. 1.4 dwelling units per acre is not low density. Florida statutes allows for the installation, quote, the installation of enhanced nutrient-reducing on-site sewage treatment and disposal systems or other wastewater treatment systems that achieve at least 65% nitrogen reduction. This option would be and is consistent with rural development. Unfortunately, the county has incentivized suburban-type development in rural areas. We ask that the county reverse this trend, work with the residents to find ways to incentivize rural-type development within rural areas. We found that in Lee County, RHINO stands for rural in name only. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Good to have you back at the LPA. Mr. Klingensmith, followed by Amanda Cochran.
Thank you. I'm Alan Klingensmith, Alva and North Olga resident. And Mr. Strouder, thanks for talking about the possibility of being forced to join a sewer. My house is probably a quarter of a mile or less from a proposed sewer line, and that's one of my fears. I would hate to enhance my septic system, pay $30,000 and put in a new system, and then a couple years later the county comes by and says, you got to hook up to this sewer. So that is a fear. I don't know a lot about the House bill. I think it's well-intentioned, but a little overreaching for the rural areas. I don't see that happening for years and years and years, and I know you're planning, but I oppose the advancement of this amendment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Klingensmith. Amanda, followed by Darius Cochran.
Thank you. 3 minutes is hard to get this all out. Ever since the Board of Commissioners in 2018 removed the language, quote, overriding public necessity requirement from the community plans of Buckingham, Caloosahatchee Shores, Alva, and Bayshore, it has been a downhill slide toward urbanization for the rural areas of Lee County. The community banded together and challenged the board's policy to remove that protective language. An administrative law judge found in favor of the residents of the rural Lee County and agreed that the policy change was not in compliance with the community plans. However, that decision was overturned by the governor, and I have my suspicions what was involved underneath there. I'll save that. The elimination of the language from the rural future land use category that, quote, they can anticipate a continued level of public service below that of urban areas, as was previously stated, is a wolf in sheep's clothing and just another attempt to remove comprehensive plan language that defends the rural areas from urban density and urban services. We understand this comprehensive plan change addresses water quality requirement, but removing language that protects rural areas from urban capital improvements solves one problem and opens the door to many others. With all due respect, we don't feel like we're being represented and that those in power understand the value of our rural communities. Florida has a Miami and a Fort Lauderdale already. People come here to enjoy wildlife and raising livestock. It's what our community was built on. This comprehensive plan change opens the door for the elimination of the rural areas that draws visitors to our unique area. We're asking the LPA to ask staff to draft alternative language that does not remove this urban-type services protections from the rural future land use category with language that protects the rural characteristics of East Lee County. Sorry, excuse me. Thank you for the ability to address you all today. And after spending years reading through the community development documents, it seems you have to have a PhD to sift through the complicated language. I've been poring over these documents for the past few years and have somewhat successfully managed to, while reading the words on the page, look beneath to find the actual intent and motivation of these various proposals. This particular proposal seems to be a thinly veiled attempt, as been said, to increase density, intensity in the future rural land use categories. The last rural corridor of Southwest Florida, while using HB 1379 as justification. To be blunt, this is being done to us, not for us. If there was a genuine attempt to honor the intent of HB 1379, I would think we would be here focusing on areas, as it's mentioned, that deserve that type of protection against our environmental implications. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Amanda. Darius Cochran, followed by James Whitney.
Morning. Mr. Rodriguez, can you put that up? Did you get that? Awesome.
Janet, pause his timer, please.
Good morning. Appreciate it, you guys. Just looking around the room and this county facility here, and I don't see any pictures that look like this house right here, whatever you want to call that. This is what we're fighting, guys. This is Florida. If you look around your room, some of these probably were in Alva, Buckingham area. This is about putting thousands and thousands of homes that all look the same. That's going to turn us into, Hialeah, Fort Lauderdale. This is a 40-foot lot. That house has no front door. We don't want to take off. We feel like we're defending our county, defending our way of life. They're wanting to put 1,500 of these cookie-cutter houses that you got to go around the side of the house to get in the front door, next to 5-acre ranchettes that most of us out here own. We're self-sufficient. We have the best water in town. People, friends of mine, drive about 7 miles and fill up 5-gallon old Culligan water tanks every week to get reverse osmosis out of our well. It's about government control. Last year, our 5 commissioners voted to raise the water and sewer 47%. There was no input from the public. Once they force you to hook up to it, they have control of you. They control, just like FP&L, they control your electric. Most of us have generators. We don't need help when hurricanes come. We don't need water. We don't need electricity for a few days. We're not a strain on the county. I'm representing my friends, community, neighbors. This is what we're fighting. Mr. Rodriguez, do you have another picture I sent you? Oh, okay, no problem. I had a picture of the 5-acre ranchettes, but it didn't make it. We should not be forced to have something that we don't want. We have 5 people in this county that think they have all the answers for the entire county, for 800,000 people. Last year, they nominated a group of folks like you, and that group said no to water and sewer out by our area. Then the 5 people that I guess thought they were smarter than the LPA voted yes and put it through anyways. So I guess it's my time. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. James Whitney, followed by James Kennedy.
Hello, for the record, I'm James Whitney. I do have a few concerns with this system, mainly the rural areas and what it's attacking. Our BMAP is 1 unit per acre. It does affect density if we start allowing language that affects any of the rural preserve areas to have language to change to include planned sewer, water, any utilities out there. Our preserving 1 acre is huge and instrumental in preserving our water quality. If you look at, I'm from Alva, if you look at Northeast Lee County, we are the first available water storage holding areas. Our septics help keep that area recharged instead of taking water from the aquifers, putting it and sending it to a Fort Myers treatment facility to be dumped out here at the Caloosahatchee. Our water is being maintained and kept in our area where it's collected from. So on that side, I'd ask that you understand that portion, that it is an environmentally sound fact that we do need to keep our water there for Lee County. Other portions of this that I have concerns with, where are the biosolids going? If you look at the East Coast, they put out roughly 75 square miles of biosolids into Osceola County and surrounding counties up in the Kissimmee watershed area. When I factored a product called Malogranite, which is bought and sold in Home Depots, everything else, you'll see it has a suggested rate of treatment. When I extrapolated the numbers, I found that 75 square miles is being treated at 4 times the amount the homeowner is allowed to put the fertilizer on their properties. It is running into our waterways. It is coming to us through Okeechobee and coming back. Our solid sewer treatments are not a silver bullet to fix our problems. I do agree that some of the other areas where it's financially feasible, it is a possibly better option for, say, Lehigh and other areas. But it is not the best solution for all areas. And our rural areas are one of the places that we can continue to keep that recharge. It is a low density. Any of the basin management action plans, they allow the 1 unit per acre for a reason, because that's safe. And Ms. Ellis brought up the PFOS. That's the forever chemicals that can't be treated out. Those biosolids are going onto those agricultural fields, which are the last chances of, say, Osceola County. We're not expecting it to build anytime soon, but where are we getting our beef from? Where are we getting our food from? Research those acts. And one of the other cases you brought up on the connections, that sounds like eminent domain if we're not getting paid for hooking up to it.
Thank you, Mr. Whitney. Very good points. James Kennedy, followed by Philippe Mallard.
My name is James Kennedy, for the record. I'm not as prepared for this as I would like to be. I came in from working offshore for an opportunity to speak at this. This is clearly an end around, whether it's intentional on the part of the people who are initiating it as the client, but it was pushed for. It's kind of observable. This is a way of forcing in, as we've said many times, density. And that's the bottom line. This is not an environmental protection issue. If you look at the way the state statute reads, this really is just a way of green lighting increased density. For areas like Lehigh, we've said it many times, the last number I saw was 140,000 units. They're clearing 10 to 15 a week. We have a way of taking these statutes, and they're meant to do one thing, they're written to say one thing, and then by the time we actually we implement them, all they really do is increase density where we don't want it. You know, we at one point in the mid 80s, through the 90s, we recognized that we needed to protect certain areas. In the last 10 to 15 years, we've done everything we can to take those protections and roll them back to reduce them. That doesn't improve quality of life, quality of place for any of us. What it does is actually provide short-term profit and long-term problems. Like Amanda said, you know, we solve one problem and we open up the door to 3 or 4 more. Yeah, as far as the concern that was expressed about being asked to connect later, I have 23 acres that front North River Road. If I'm forced to join sewer, just my road length is roughly 440, almost 500 feet long. My setback from the road is almost 400 feet. I can't afford that. I'm a retired U.S. Navy senior chief, and I'm an offshore surveyor. I'm not exactly hurting for money, but I'm not rich. And if I had to pay for something like that, there's no way I could afford to maintain the property that I grew up on and that my family owns. Thanks.
Kennedy, thank you for your service and thank you for your time today. The last card that I have after Mr. Mallard will be Elizabeth Murphy. Is there anyone else that wishes but hasn't filled out a card? Please, sir, if you'll fill out a card. Mr. Mallard.
My name is Philippe Maillard, and I am also from Buckingham. Some of the other issues we see, it's right now, for example, in the Orange River gets all the water go to the marsh and go to the Orange River, and a lot of the pollution come from that. And you're trying to impose to have a sewer connected. But I think we need to look at the bigger picture of the problem. This is one of the big issues. We need to look at it. Obviously, a lot of people already talked before me, so it's pretty. I'm going to make it short, everybody.
Thank you for taking time out of your day to address this. Elizabeth Murphy, and our final speaker will be Keith Campbell.
Good morning. I'm Elizabeth Murphy, 31-year resident of Alva. I'd like to read this statement. Every change to the rural future land use category seems to erode protections to the rural character of the community in favor of future intense development. Case in point, this proposed change to the LEAP plan to supposedly comply with the 2023 legislative bill HB 1379 opens the door for increased density by striking density protective language in the future rural land use category. The county suggests the deletion of the current language that, quote, rural areas are not to be programmed to receive urban-type capital improvements, and they can anticipate a continued level of public service below that of urban areas. We understand this change is supposed to address a bill that is focused on water quality, but the change in language to the rural future land use category makes it easier to approve high-density development in rural areas by paving the way for water and sewer. We implore the county to craft neutral language rather than language that potentially strips the community of its rural character. By removing the language that states we should anticipate a continued level of service below the urban area, you essentially open the door for urban sprawl. The Buckingham Community Plan Policy 20.3.1 states the availability of central sewer lines will not be accepted as justification for a density or intensity increase or reduction of lot size requirements. We ask the LPA to consider recommending adding the same density protective language into the future rural land use category or to all of the rural community plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, and we are now closing after we hear from Mr. Musco.
Good morning. My name is Keith Campbell. I'm with the Buckingham community. I'm not going to sit here and repeat what you've been hearing, but I want to point something out to you. Tom Blackburn, 30 years ago, was a young guy like me, sat in his community fighting for his future. He's fighting for his future today. I was in Cape Coral, and Cape Coral did exactly what they're trying to do right here in the rural community. I was forced to pay $18,000 up front or pay over 30 years on taxes, which would have been like $100,000. That's what they're going to try to do. I don't know what the governor's thinking. If he wants to be in Miami, then you know something, why does he go to another state and get his Miami? We moved to Buckingham because of the rural communities. We want our future to be just what we're doing now. I like playing with my horses, other people's cows, goats. Do I mind stepping in horse crap and all the other stuff? No. This weekend I had 200 children who are very less fortunate that had a private party at my place, and they enjoyed the rural community. If I want a sewer and all that other stuff in there, I'll put my own damn pipes in and I'll do it my damn self. I take care of my own roads just like my neighbors do. If we don't need Miami in Buckingham. We ask that you guys protect us and keep our rural communities the way they are. Because you know something? Like Don's been fighting for 30 years, I ain't going anywhere anytime soon. I'll be here for 50 more years for Buckingham and Alva. Please do what's right for our people. Listen to us like they did 30 years ago. That's the problem with government these days. You're not working with your people. Look at the changes in Cape Coral in the last election. They didn't listen to their people, they got voted out. We can continue to do the same thing if people get smart. Thank you.
Keith. Mike Musho?
With regard to these change to the LEAP Plan 1.41, this is just a continuation in our view in the neighborhood, is that we keep getting attacked from developers and county wanting to make changes to accommodate those developing growth. I see this as a Trojan horse to that end. We have a rural community in Bayshore, Alva, and a lot of other areas in the county. People, I should say, developers are salivating over all these areas. These developers, we understand, have a lot of political clout, and we're afraid that this is just one of the overreaches that is going to happen. Once we do this kind of change, it will dice up all the rural areas of Lee County. It will be gone eventually. It's already eroding. And it really affects the traffic that we have, the traffic issues that nobody seems to want to address at what I would consider a urgency. We're nibbling around the corners, around the edges with totally emergency fixes. This will just add to that traffic issues that we're having. We're eroding the quality of life in Lee County. We're spending an hour and a half to 2 hours each way to go to work and to come back home. These are times that we can't spend with our families. Unproductive time sitting in the vehicles, burning fuel, costing money. We can't put additional hours in our workplaces to try to fight inflation. Everything that we're doing with this crazy development, I understand development. It needs to be done. We rely on it. But not at the pace that we're doing. And let's have development, fine. But we're forgetting about infrastructure. The roadways are horrific. We're turning into almost Miami to get from point A to point B. This is really one of the underlying causes of it. We're addressing the traffic when it's already too late. It starts here with overdevelopment. These kind of changes are the Trojan horse and a way for developers to come into an area and build it out and change the whole neighborhood atmosphere. We're paying good money to live in those areas. We spent a lot of years. I've been there since 1969. And we're ruining Lee County. We're not improving it because it bleeds into traffic, congestion, lifestyle, quality of life, less time spent with families, less time spent making a living. It starts here. This is where it starts, these kind of changes. So please, keep that in mind. Pass this up to the next level of powers to be. Okay? Everybody here works, most of the people work here for the commission. Ultimately, the buck stops with them. But pass these on. They're not listening to us. Honestly, they are not listening to us. Totally. We're saying it. It doesn't matter because they chop off each little section of the county and they say, well, we're doing it for the betterment of the whole county.
Mr. Ruscio, your time is expired.
Thank you. I guess you understand where my stand is. Thank you so much.
We appreciate your sentiments. To the staff, we've heard these voices and we've heard their sentiments. I have made some notes, and would staff like to resume the dais and speak to any of these matters? I can specify 4 in particular.
I'd like to say just a few things, if possible.
You'd like to what?
I'd like to say a few things just to kind of to start a response, and then if you have questions you'd like us to address, let's handle it that way.
Thank you, Brandon.
I know there's skepticism here, but this was not about rural lands or making an area less rural. And I'd also like to point out that existing policies do not prohibit expansion of water or sewer, but says that capital improvements should not be expected. It would not stop a private developer from expanding water and sewer into these areas. I'd also like to point out that this change would allow for public expenditure, including possibility of using grant funding for these projects. And I'd also like to point out that policies 1.4.1 and 1.4.3 do not specifically mention sewer, but it mentions public services or urban-type capital improvements. That could include EMS, that could include roads, that could include schools, libraries, parks. There are a whole host of public services or capital improvements that the county would like to make, or the county does make, and we are probably making some inconsistent with the Lee Plan, like our lakes, or the regional park, the Clusacchio Regional Park. That is public expenditure in the rural area. That being said, I think we have heard them, and we're not, this isn't about rural, as I said, and I believe that. We will go back and look at the amendments proposed for policies 1.4.1, 1.4.3, Objective 18.3, Policy 18.3.1, and Policy 20.3.1 to determine if those are absolutely necessary. We can make a commitment to relook at those and make sure that they are needed to comply with the Florida statutes. If you have other questions, we will answer those as they come.
I think that you've addressed them in a broad enough fashion, and I can't let this regress into a debate. It's not a debate, it's an LPA hearing. So I appreciate staff's responses. I'd like to now go to the LPA and gather their sentiments and see where we end up. So anybody care to start this?
Can County Attorney just make a comment on the fact that this has been brought to us, or staff has created this language in compliance of a directive by the state? If we do nothing, what is the consequences?
Failure to amend our comprehensive plan in the face of an inconsistency with a recently amended state statute would create a problem under state law. We're required to maintain consistency with the Florida statutes as they are amended. But as Brandon said, I mean, this is the first public airing of this proposed language, so this is indeed the public forum to talk about the ramifications of the specific text changes.
And I'll just add that the policies that I mentioned that we would take a look at and reconsider, those Those amendments were precautionary amendments, in the event that the statute requires us to do something, just to, increase our efficiency or, to reduce us having to come back and do this at a time when we're actually required to. So they're precautionary. I want to talk with the county attorneys and the rest of the staff to make sure that they're needed, or if they're not needed, we can maybe move on without them. We can look at that.
I mean, just to reiterate, if sewer services are brought into an area where there is none today, and it crosses properties that are utilizing septic systems today that are working, the requirements, if this passes, is that they have to tie into it, or provided their existing systems work, they can be left alone?
Excuse me, Nathan Beals. For the way the language is written now, if it is a gravity sewer that is run along the front of a property, then that is considered available. And technically, if the homeowner is notified that it is available, they have to connect within 365 days. The majority of the existing lots would not have a gravity sewer run in front of them. They would be pressurized force mains to transmit flow from communities to our treatment facilities. And in that case, the state does not consider that available. They consider that as an undue burden in most cases, from my understanding. If somebody goes in for a septic system, they say, is there sewer available? We tell them there's a pressurized main. They say, okay, and they let them do a conventional or advanced, depending on where
So the resident like that couldn't just directly tie into a force main?
If they chose to, they could talk to us and they could connect if they wanted.
We still have maps 4A and 4B within the LEED plan that you are required to be on if you are going to connect to the water and sewer. I know there are a couple exceptions for that, but again, that's another thing that if you're not on that map, we're not going to determine that it's available to you. So there's another step in that in the legal framework as well.
Anything further, Ray? We'll come back to you if you have something. Dustin, do you have any?
This has all come along in terms of water quality and LACO discharge and just the general consensus of Caloosahatchee River water quality and outflows into the Gulf of Mexico. Is that where the state has pushed this stuff forward?
Yeah, a lot of this is coming through the DMAPs and TMDLs. It is a water quality aspect. The condensed septic is known as to be contributor to the water quality. So therefore, to help combat that, that's where the 50 lots requiring
And in that, they're ascertaining that it's septic systems that is making such a large proportionate issue that this needs to be addressed. Like, what's the breakdown of that? Like, in terms of these residents here, what percentage of impact are they having versus, say, LACO?
Well, the exact impact, I can't tell you that right now. Most of the time when we have rain events and everything, the water we see coming down the actual watershed is from our own watershed. The majority of it. So we don't see as big an impact. But when we get to centralized areas, we did a study in North Fort Myers, we found out doing tracing that a lot of the nutrient impacts is from septic tanks in North Fort Myers. Going through tracing the sources of that nitrogen. But remember, this is a statewide thing, not necessarily just for.
Sure. So has the thought even come up of replacing these inadequate septic systems with ATUs instead of forcing utilities?
So the statute requires that if somebody has to, currently, if you're located within a BMAP and you have to go in and get a new septic system and you're on less than 1 acre, right?
Yes.
Then you have to do an advanced septic if you can't connect to sewer.
Yeah, so I'm specifically asking, is there a test of these property owners to say, hey, you have an inadequate system that needs to be updated, and they convert to an ATU system instead of running piping 300, 400 foot down their driveways at these exuberant costs? Is there a more pinpoint type of a solution for the properties that maybe who are contributing to the water quality?
Well, I think typically you're not going to find the 400-foot driveways in a under-acre lot, and what you're going to have is the state is, I think, and what they're trying to do is instead of having one fail come in and change it, is they're trying to make it so that the county looks to extend out public systems to those areas where they know there's a condensed area. So it's actually trying to, I guess, do what you're saying, knowing they're a problem, running central sewer to those locations and have a plan to actually address that.
Okay, thank you.
Not at this time. Don?
Thank you, Stan. I had the same similar question that Ray has asked in regards to this being predicated based on House policy and our implementation. So is there a time frame for implementing this change for the county? Because the House bill was passed in 2023. We're here in late 2024. So is there a mandate coming? And the reason I ask that is given that, Brandon, you have raised consideration of going back and looking at a number of these policies based on comments that you received today, whether that couldn't be done and come back before us again for evaluation in consideration of those policies that you mentioned before this moves forward. But I need to understand the time frame that you're under to implement that.
So we were supposed to have these policies or these changes implemented by July 1st of this year. We are behind schedule right now. We're also dealing with other Florida statutes that are in conflict with this, namely Senate Bill 250, which prohibits us from proposing or adopting ordinances or LDC amendments or plan policies that are more restrictive than what currently exists. So it took us some while to kind of tiptoe through the changes that we're proposing and make sure that those changes are consistent with this. We've also, so we are a little bit behind schedule. I don't know that that has huge implications. We've gotten a couple comments when we get letters back from state reviewing agencies for other projects, just reminding us that we're behind schedule, but no one's raised it as a major red flag at this point yet.
Amanda, are we under an edict to yes or no this?
I think the answer is no. There is no requirement. I mean, other than we should have done it already, we're behind schedule, but I think the fact that we're continuing to work on it and continuing to vet the language would probably, in my opinion, satisfy state agencies. But again, not being employed by those agencies, I cannot speak for them.
Go on.
I have one other question. I'm sorry, Stan. Just so I'm clear, since this is a House bill, all counties in Florida are grappling with this issue. It's just not Lee County. Is that correct?
Correct. This applies to all local government comprehensive plans.
I appreciate staff looking into the changes to the planning community policies to see if they're needed. I would only say if they do find that they're needed, maybe if we can, instead of make it a blanket, maybe more associated with the BMAPs, because some of them you just strike the language total, so it would apply to the whole area. Maybe if it is possible to just center that on the BMAP areas, so it's specific to those areas instead of in general.
In general, I am in support of this, and we have to do it to get in conformance with the state policy. However, I hear a lot of distrust from the citizens here, and I think because there seems to be direct conflict in language and policies right next to one another, saying you have to have a 1 acre minimum lot size, but then also saying the utilities. So I think the policies that you mentioned, I think that those do need to be looked at a little bit more clearly. But otherwise, I think it's a good start. I don't know if we need to postpone to review the language. I think it's pretty clear that when the Buckingham community or rural preserve community says 1 acre, it means 1 acre. So that would be the policies that I would object to.
else, Ray?
If we've got the ability to table, I would be in favor of that. If this is a must-go, then let's go. What ability do we have?
Oh, let me see. The options, hang on just a second. We might need to see what the options are for the,
To give Amanda some time to search that. What is before us today is the House bill with some additional accoutrements. Is that fair? Or is it just specifically the House bill has passed?
It is just the House bill. The House bill currently, in my mind, as I interpret it, requires Lee County to start planning ahead. It's not requiring us at this time to extend water and sewer to anyone or to require anyone to hook up to water and sewer, but that may be coming. And some of the amendments that were proposed are in anticipation of that. They're not related to House Bill 1379, but some of the ones, specifically, that add the language unless required by state statute. We see something might come up. We don't know what it is. We're not looking to force anyone to do it, but it might come up. So, right now it's a plant. They're requiring us to plant. In the future, that may change.
Okay.
so you do have the option to continue a public hearing if you do feel that it needs to be continued.
So that could be into the February meeting.
Correct. The other option would be to move forward the changes to the policies that seem to not be as controversial. I believe Brandon listed the specific policies and objectives that they were going to take a look at. I would agree that some of those would be considered more prophylactic, if you will, moving forward. Excuse me. So if that would be another possibility too, if you wanted staff to look at very specific policies and continue discussion on that and move forward some of the other language changes, that would be an option.
Brandon, which ones were on your list?
Yeah.
Policy 1.4.1, that's policy dealing with the rural future land use category. Policy 1.4.3, that is policy dealing with the rural community preserve. Future land use category. Objective 18.3, that is a objective specific to Bayshore community. Policy 18.3.1 is a policy specific to the Bayshore community. And policy 20.3.1, which is specific to the Buckingham Rural Community Preserve.
All right. It would be my thoughts, since we've shared yours, that our charge today is not to adjudicate whether this is right or wrong. Our charge today as the LPA is to see if it is complicit with the future land use map and development code. We clearly have sentiments that are favorable to the public's opinion, which in many instances I share, but my charge today, our charge today, is it compliant with the future land use? It's my understanding that we have the ability to continue some, all, or not any of this. It's my understanding that we have a July 1st mandate, so now we're 5 months overdue. Therefore, it would be my sentiments that we get it right, we don't just get it faster. It would be my sentiments that we would have a motion that would move forward those things to the exclusion of those call-outs that Brandon had just given us, and that said motion would entail for the BOCC's consideration, and bear in mind that we are not a deciding body. We are an advisory body. We have no binding authority. But we have an obligation per our appointment to act in accordance with our charge, which is to take action on this. So in summary, I would find that a motion, I would be favorable towards a motion that would embrace the transmittal of this, of those items that were not excluded, called out by Brandon right here, and that we are forced to have to comply with under penalty from the state of Florida. I would also point out that this is a House bill. This is not Lee County staff. This isn't the LPA. This is being thrust upon us by those members of the House of Representatives and your state elected officials. And if you have disdain over this, they would be the people to whom you take the fight. And we are basically having to enact what has been passed down from the state level. So to conclude my remarks, I would welcome a motion that finds this compliant and transmit to the exception of, and I've recited them if necessary, and that we table those specific items until the next meeting.
Why don't you just continue it and give Brandon some time to look at what he needs to look at?
We're not able to speak on what we're passing in the moment and changing from what we were here to meet for today.
He hasn't done the research to find out what he can actually put on there.
We are carving out these items, and again, this is not a public debate. This is an LPA meeting. So that is how I would see this. And if there is a motion of same or similar, now would be the time to make it.
I agree. I'll make a motion to transmit with the exceptions of the policy that Brandon outlined. So to transmit CPA 2024-0007, House Bill 1379.
I'll second. I have a question.
Don?
The items that you have proposed in your motion to exclude, does that then create a continuation of the public hearing on those items? And the reason I'm asking that is, would it preclude the public from speaking on those items when it comes back before us again in a future meeting?
To my understanding, it would not preclude them, but it's a legal thing, not my thing.
So the motion is to move forward the amendment changes with the exception of the listed policies. I guess then the question is what the motion is regarding those exceptions. Is that a continuance of that portion of it, or are you recommending us not transmit that and then and then it would go to the board for their opinion as a package? And actually, I'm sorry, let me clarify that. I don't believe, let me clarify that, because I have to be very specific. We don't have many continuances here. So I'm not certain, actually, that you can continue one portion of the hearing. And so I think it is going to be either you recommend not to transmit the exceptions or you continue the whole hearing.
This is why we need to do more research.
Or we can, Amanda, can we make the motion that we transmit exculping those specific items?
Correct. And then perhaps ask that if, to the extent that those exceptions are not ultimately presented for board consideration, that if there are other changes, they would be brought back to the LPA for a new hearing.
Brandon, you have the floor.
I'm sorry, but we're reacting to changes and comments that are happening at a public meeting. This is the legislative process, so we are just trying to follow the rules on paper. I understand that you're not satisfied with that, but we're at a public meeting and we require decorum. Public comment has been closed. Public comment has been closed. I believe we all understand your opinion. But again, this is the legislative process and we are trying to follow the rules right now and responding to your comments. So if you would give us an opportunity to do that, we will.
So Brandon?
Excuse me, public comment has been ceased and we require decorum at a public meeting, please.
Brandon?
You're at a public meeting.
If you were to recommend transmittal of the the amendments, with the exception of the policies that I mentioned, that would require staff to do the research before we moved on to the Board of County Commissioners, whether they are necessary or not. We would have to justify our continued recommendation of approval or transmittal through additional research, or we would look into it and we would agree with your recommendation to not transmit those sections, and they would not move forward to the Board of County Commissioners. But going that route, if you wanted, if that was your desire to recommend transmittal of the ones that were not mentioned, but not transmittal of the ones that were mentioned, staff would then be required to do that research and justify any changes to those policies.
It really comes down to timing.
Correct.
I don't know if I feel confident sending a motion to the board, given our responsibility for consistency with the comp plan. And, specifically the Buckingham Rural Preserve, when the policy right behind it says that lots have to be 1 acre, why then adding utility expansion right next to it that would never happen if it is not an acre? It seems to me that
I can add to that. There is a property within the community preserve that meets the threshold of the state statute for requiring the water and sewer planning. It's the Airport East. It's within the community rural preserve. And there are areas within the rural future land use that also meet the statute. I believe there's 5 of them. So that if you don't include that language, we wouldn't be able to serve those areas.
it is applicable to isolated properties, but not the majority of the properties.
Yes, there are properties in rural and
So we have a motion and we have a second.
I understand the motion on the table is not
I need to withdraw.
allowable based on Amanda's latest comments.
Well, the motion on the table was to transmit with certain exceptions. So that is still a valid motion should it be on the table. And I would interpret that to mean exactly what we normally do here. You recommend to the Board of County Commissioners to transmit certain portions, and you recommend against transmitting others. Ultimately, if you continue it, you will have to make that exact same vote at the next meeting. Again, your sole purview is to recommend to the Board of County Commissioners whether or not to adopt to transmit or not. The continuance would potentially allow staff to revise the proposed language for your consideration, but if the ultimate issue is whether or not that language is necessary under the House bill, then I'm not sure a revision would really satisfy your issues. Either, up to me, either you believe that it's required under that House bill or you don't. I could be incorrect. This is just my interpretation of the discussion that I'm hearing.
Thank you. Thank you. Please. So we have a second. We have a motion, and the motion is to transmit with these exceptions.
Excluded.
Excluded.
So those 4 policies would not be included in the amendment in my recommendation. No changes would be made to those policies, those 4 policies.
I would support that, and I would support your second.
And that's not to say that the board couldn't override our recommendation
Exactly.
and include those
Exactly.
if they deem themselves appropriate.
And that gives staff additional time to review and edit, correct, or support that in front of the BOCC.
I think it's important legislation, and we've got 30,000 lots we're talking about. So if there's a dozen of them in these rural areas, I don't think there's any reason to kick that chicken coop quite yet when there's, large areas that need to be taken care of in Suncoast and Lehigh and areas like that.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Janet, are you clear on the motion? Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you for your motion.
For your outline.
All right, it is 11:10, and we have a beefy amount of agenda left. So I'm going to call a 10-minute recess, and we'll reconvene at 11:20.
Fire.
Yes, good job.
Thank you.
The problem is, you gotta sympathize with them. You sympathize with them, and there's gotta be some way that can, gotta be.
Okay, for the record, the LPA on this date is reconvening. We are now going to address the remaining items on the agenda, and those would be agenda item number 5, Land Development Code Amendments, Articles A through I, and I wish to have the LPA's input. I had envisioned doing this A, B, C, as opposed to a more collective. Does that match what you guys want to do?
I would respect that for the fact that I also, just out of the abundance of caution, are going to recuse myself, sorry, from 5F as well. It does affect 2 properties that I'm currently working on. So having them taken up separately, I would appreciate that.
All right, and Janet, the record would reflect. If there's no objection to that format, then we'll proceed accordingly.
And I have filed the proper form with Janet.
Thank you. All right. Go ahead.
Just checking to see if it was still the morning. Good morning. Anthony Rodriguez, Zoning Section Manager with Community Development. We have 9 different topic areas we're going to touch on this morning. They'll be presented by various staff who've taken the lead on preparing these language changes for your consideration. We are looking for individual motions and votes on whether or not these are consistent with the lead plan. And I'm going to turn it over to Katie Woolner, who's going to introduce our first item for food truck parks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Good morning again. Katie Wellner, ASP Principal Planner for the Planning Section with Lee County. So this first one is regarding food truck parks. So if you're not familiar, food truck parks are where like multiple food trucks go and there's like a common seating area and all of those things. This is not going to impact individual food trucks. So what this does is it creates a food truck park definition. It allows food truck parks in quite a few standard zoning districts. It includes design requirements, parking standards, and standards for alcohol licensing. And I'm happy to answer questions on what you guys have regarding the proposed amendments, or I can give you a more detailed look at what we're proposing.
Well, we've all had a chance to review this. Do we want staff to give us a more detailed, or are we prepared to move through without a greater detail of each item? What do you guys want to do?
I think we've all had a chance to review it. We can ask our questions if we have them, right?
Yeah, let's do that. And I noticed the staff has these paragraphs, so let's do the paragraph and then let's take the item. So we're now on food trucks. Are there any questions from the LPA on this sector?
I know that there are a few food truck parks that are currently approved within Lee County, Backyard Social probably being one. I think there's another one being constructed down in 6 Mile, and if I'm not mistaken. How do these regulations, proposed regulations, match up to what was done at those parks?
So currently, to do a food truck, you have to go through the plan development process. This would allow it in some of the standard zoning districts, just to differentiate that a little bit. But the actual design requirements for food truck parks that we're proposing in this are pretty similar to what was approved for the PDs that have been approved. So parking is pretty similar. The commercial design requirements is similar. It should look pretty similar to what what has been approved through the PD process.
So is it safe to say those that went through that PD process helped generate some of these?
Yes.
Format of these regulations?
Yes, we definitely looked at them.
No further questions.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah. On the permitted use table, I see that RV, PD, MHPD, and RPDs don't have food trucks allowed. I know that that is a common use at amenity facilities. Would that be like a temporary permit separately than this?
Yeah, we discussed it internally because originally we were debating including it and decided that it would be something that they could add into their PD either through a temporary use or through the PD approvals as an accessory use, essentially.
The other comment I have is on the parking. I know in other areas of the code, you can have reduced parking if they're with access to bus stops, bike racks, bike lanes, things like that. Would those sections of the codes be applicable to food truck parks as well?
Yes, and in the note, it talks about food truck parks that are in future urban areas that have central utilities have a reduced parking requirement. And if you're in the mixed use overlay, you would of course have the mixed use overlay reduced parking requirement.
The only other comment I would have is design 343182A1. You're talking about the setback requirements. Maybe consider adding also building separation, that the separation of the pads would follow building separation too. That's all I had.
Take into consideration the location of existing establishments, as I would be contrary to being in favor of this if it's in competition to brick and mortar establishments.
The intent with this was to sort of create food truck parks as a similar use category to restaurants. So it would be something that could potentially compete with restaurants, yes.
On page 3 of 6, the top paragraph, for N49, food truck parks within trade port future land use categories, subject to limitations, standalone retail, identified 1.13, food trucks within industrial development, future land use, subject to limitations, recreational service, retail and uses identified in 1.1.7. Could you give me some examples of those limitations?
I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but the intent there is that we want to maintain our industrial areas for industrial uses, and so we want to make sure that they're not just going to be overrun with non-industrial uses. So I believe there's a percentage cap for non-industrial uses in those areas, and it looks like Brandon might have your answer for you.
Within the industrial development future land use category, developments or retail uses, which we are lumping this in with, as we typically do other restaurants, are limited to 20% of the land area within the industrial development future land use category within that planning community. So it doesn't mean you couldn't have a property that's 100% retail, but it's got to, so for industrial development, we are looking at a percentage across the entire planning community or community plan area that you're in. Within the trade port future land use category, the limitation on retail commercial is a bit different. It's essentially about 10% of each property, give or take a few acres, that could be developed for retail uses.
So it won't cannibalize those traditional uses by being a food truck park?
That's the intent, yeah.
And with all due respect to those that operate food trucks, how does this impact those that do roach coaches? The food trucks, when I was a carpenter, we used to call them roach coaches.
I understood.
I'm sure they appreciate that.
Yeah, with all due respect, sorry. But like the guy that shows up and he's got the cranky horn and it's a job site, does this impact him at all?
So the proverbial roach coaches, they typically operate under existing mobile food vendor regulations as a temporary use. So you may remember a couple years ago, we were preempted by the state of Florida on regulating or requiring separate licenses or permits for mobile food vendors.
Yes.
So in response to that, what we did was we established some parameters by which a single mobile food vendor could go out, conduct their business on a particular property or properties, and then take everything home at the end of the day. So there's kind of two paths for food truck operators. They can operate under that temporary use, or they can operate in one of these parks.
Thank you for that explanation. On page 4 of 6, under section 34-2020 required parking, where it talks about food trucks, minimum required spaces for single use 10, how did we get to 5? 5 spaces per conveyance parking.
So the 5 spaces per conveyance parking is for if it's within like a bigger development, like let's say Gulf Coast wanted to add a food truck park in one of their, out parcels or something. Like if they have shared parking that's part of a bigger development, then the idea there is that it's a multi-tenant, like multi-use development that has some shared parking. Just generally, you're going to park, you're going to wander around. You don't necessarily need separate parkings or complete separate parking for the new use.
Well, in my notes, that used to be 4 spaces and now it's 5. Is there a reason that it's 25% more?
Used to be 4 spaces.
Trying to find where I found the 4.
In the mixed use overlay, it does allow the parking requirement to be reduced, I think, to 4 parking spaces per conveyance. So that's a different situation.
Okay, I just don't want to overburden them with parking. Page 5 of 6, 34, 31, 81A. Instead of in the last 10 years, I would insert a date of since 2014.
Okay.
That's all I have on this section. Anyone else have anything else for this section?
So for currently approved planned developments that fall under the newly permitted, food truck use, if you have, your schedule of uses and the uses are listed and food truck is not in there, you're still permitted based on this? Will they be allowed to put a food truck even if it's not in their schedule of uses as a currently approved MPD or CPD?
My guess is that they would have to amend their PD to be able to include that use.
Administratively, they could add that?
That's a good question for Anthony.
I would say in all likelihood, the path is probably going to be administrative, because you're going to have, the way that we kind of look at those requests when they come in is we're looking to see if there are other similar uses in terms of intensity and character
And then,
already permitted. So
I get what you're saying, but say, for example, and only from experience, we had tried to add food truck parks, but it didn't exist at that time. And so when we went through that zoning, we already tried to put the effort, but now we still have to go back through that administrative process that you're suggesting to add it.
That's correct.
Okay.
But that would be for an RPD image, but not for a CPD. The CPD is expressly permitted.
No, just the MPD.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. And Amanda, I think we'll move these a section at a time.
I believe that's what staff.
All right. Do I have a motion to move this forward?
I'll make a motion to pass this food truck.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye.
No,
Was that a no?
that's a no.
Okay. Ray was opposed. Next item will be fences and walls.
Good morning, committee members. For the record, my name is Adam Mendez. I'm with the Lee County Community Development Zoning Section. This next item before you is primarily addressing the height and location of fences in residential areas. When I say residential areas, I do mean these lot-specific situations for which residential fence permits are pulled for, and excluding the residential project fences you might see around communities. These amendments do not pertain to those fences as they're regulated elsewhere. There's really 3 areas in this particular set of amendments that are aimed at being addressed. The first is privacy fencing located on corner lots and through lots and other multiple frontage lots, where currently there are property owners with what we call secondary streets for which their vehicles don't access, that they have to abide by a setback that's consistent with what a principal structure would be required on their lot. And generally speaking, that's 25 feet. And some areas it may be 20 feet, depending on what that minimum principal structure setback is. And so the result is the department receives many, many requests for variances from these standards from lot owners that see this as taking half of their what they envision to be their backyard. And so we have devised some regulations after experience with these situations to allow these secondary streets to have reduced street setbacks for 6-foot privacy fences and the like, down to 5 feet for those secondary streets, except for where there may be a utility easement that may encumber additional width. The second piece is along the same lines, and that is to allow fences to be located closer to non-navigable water bodies, such as drainage canals and other water management areas. Currently, the Land Development Code restricts the height of solid fencing to, I believe it is 3.5 feet, 42 inches, if you're within 25 feet of any water body. And so what we're looking to do is exclude non-navigable water bodies and other water management areas from that requirement. And we'll, to some degree, there are planned communities that have deed restrictions that they'll govern themselves accordingly if there's a view shed that they feel that needs to be protected. But we do feel pretty confident that this will serve at large the greater population of Lee County when we talk about canals in Lehigh Acres or any conveyance or body of water that it holds water for more than 3 months, which by that virtue you meet the definition of water body. The third piece is really an inspection piece. Currently, the code allows for 4 inches of grace when it comes to the irregularities in grade when we're talking about fence height. And fence height is measured from the adjacent property's grade, whatever that is. It's not measured from a uniform standpoint like the center line of the crown of the road. And so the fence inspectors are given 4 inches of grace for those situations where you might end up in a situation with properties with drainage swales with a 3-to-1 slope. 4 inches proves to be insufficient when we're reaching, when we're installing those 6-foot panels up a side slope. We have found that within your typical setback, 24 inches would be sufficient. And again, this wouldn't be permitting additional fence height when it comes to the structural member of the materials. We're just talking about the fence running up a side slope to attach to a house or what have you. So those are the 3 pieces that are aimed to be addressed in this item before you. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Thank you. Any questions for staff on this? I like it. I think it's a great correction, and I support it. If no other questions, I have a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Thank you.
Thank you. I also have the next item before us, which is wrong keyboard. Item C, this is concerning pools, pool decks, and other similar recreational facilities where our supplemental regulations in Chapter 34 regulate the height. Currently, the height is regulated based on the facility's elevation above what's considered the 12 inches above the crown of the road. That is where structures are measured uniformly in accordance with our Land Development Code in most instances. And so we have regulations concerning these facilities, I say recreational facilities in general, that they can't exceed 42 inches above grade. Grade, again, is defined as 12 inches above the average elevation of the crown of the road. In especially in the last few years with rebuilding in these flood-prone areas, we have run into numerous administrative approval requests to allow some of these facilities to be elevated a little higher than what would be 42 inches above grade to allow a pool deck or a similar facility to be somewhere in line with the first minimum habitable floor that FEMA requires in tandem with the building code requirements. In most cases, staff is able to approve these, and these departures are generally 1 to 3 feet. And this is just to get them to the minimum or within a step down that provides accessibility really to these pools and similar recreational facilities. The amendments before you would allow specifically these flood-prone areas to elevate to these areas with a 10-foot setback, whereas the current code would require them to meet the principal structure setback. So for most rear lot lines, you're looking at 20 feet. If there's a water body, 25 feet, depending on where that lot line falls adjacent to the rear lot line. We do feel that the amendments as proposed would help obviate several incoming administrative approvals that would otherwise be grantable or we could grant. So I could answer any further questions if you guys have anything on this.
I have no further questions. Motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve as proposed.
I'll second it.
Don, second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Marcia, I see that you're here, and
I am, I'm waiting.
which one would you like to wait for?
Airport, density is the next one, no, density, E, F, G, and H.
Okay.
That's fine, I'm already here.
Okay. Well, the next item then, staff would like to come.
So the next item before you this morning is a reorganization and a rewording of our existing entrance gates and gatehouse section. Currently, the code language contains incorrect cross-references. It contains duplicative language. There's a little bit of ambiguity in the existing language, and so it becomes a little bit difficult to administer consistently. So our goal is to modify and reorganize the section to remove that duplicative language, correct incorrect cross-references, and clarify the applicability of this section. One of the things that we face when we administer this section in particular is when the design requirements for turnarounds and length of queuing kick in. The interpretation has always been that it's on the entry side of that gate, and so we are codifying that interpretation among other things. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the section is going to be a little bit better organized. It's going to be more easy to administer consistently. So I can answer any technical questions you have, and we have development services staff here as well to do that.
I'll go to the LPA first. Anybody? So Anthony, on page 1 of 6, notwithstanding other applicable regulations, no density calculation is required for hospitals, prisons, jails, boot camps, detention centers, or other similar type facilities owned or operated by a county, state, or federal agency.
Jumped ahead, Stan. That's the next one.
Sir?
That's the next one.
Oh, okay.
We're on item 4D. Sorry about that.
We're on entrance gates.
D is in Delta. Okay. Yes, I see that. While we're jumping here, back on the previous one on page 5 of 5, it may be a typo under C1. Facilities located in a special flood hazard area which are designed and constructed at or below the lowest minimum habitable floor elevation for which a building permit may be issued, located? Might that be may be located?
There is a B, yes, there is the word B missing there. Thank you.
That's right. Okay. I have nothing on entrance gates and gate houses.
Motion to approve as stated.
Second?
Second.
Dustin, discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. E is regarding density, so this amendment is to the section of the Land Development Code that addresses density. Currently, this section and the Lee Plan conflict. This amendment fixes that inconsistency and some other inconsistencies with state statutes. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay. Anybody?
Yeah, I have a question on page 3. When they're talking about plan development, section C. Would MPDs, would they not be included in that as well?
I believe the first one would address MPDs because it says in plan developments other than residential plan developments. So it would be anything other than a RPD.
Okay. Thank you.
On page 4 of 6, for the, let's see here, B1 for bed and breakfast. So if you have 4 units, just the way that it's read, it says when lodging includes less than 4, and then further down it says if you have, let's see here, exceeding 4. So there's no specific if you have 4. If I'm just reading it in layman's term, I'd be, okay, well, if I have 4 rentable units without kitchens, do I fall in which category?
We'll have to, it should be less than, or I suppose equal to 4 units for the first
Includes
one.
up to 4 units.
Up to 4
Okay,
units.
that's
Yeah, that was
what I
the intent.
Okay.
If you go back to page 1 of 6, 34-1491, item 2, I'd read that, and hospitals, prisons, da-da-da, owned or operated by a county, state, or federal agency. Why would those not be applicable to those same type of providers owned or operated by a private entity?
So the short answer is I don't know, but that's current language that we just moved where it was located. So that's something that we can look at and potentially add if we decide that it is necessary.
Those types of operations are more commonly operated now more so by private entities, or increasingly so, not more so. So I would ask that be applicable to private entities, not just public. Anything else? Motion?
Make a motion to approve with the comments that were provided by the...
Second?
I'll second.
Did we call public comment on that? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
You had listed many, so I didn't know if you... All right, yeah.
Actually, I've got a little, just something quick to say on that one.
Please, Marcia.
Okay, thank you so much. Super. Thank you, Marcia Ellis, for the record, and I am speaking on E, which are the density calculations. This comes up very frequently in zoning actions, where we're trying to figure out the calcs on the density. So I think it is, I appreciate the efforts to try to give some clarity to the process, because I think that that's important. However, what I am concerned about is looking at the total land and backing out the wetlands, from the overall density calc. And again, trying to do a one-size-fits-all for what are a variety of types of developments. Especially whenever, we start looking at properties that might be like along the river or along streams, where it's clear that that acreage is absolutely never going to be developed. And I think that trying to cast too wide of a net doesn't really honor what good planning and community development is about, which is looking at those, local features and recognizing the environmental conditions and then building off of that to make sure that the solution isn't going to cause problems in the future. I think that we really have to respect and honor the wetlands and not be granting densities based on calculations that are excluding them. I also think that there could be a missed opportunity for looking in more detail at existing development whenever it comes into density increases. Because if there are density increases that are coming into planned developments or condos or whatever, there are existing amenities, there are existing roads, and I think that having some clarity about that moving forward would be helpful, so that folks that are there, that they're what they own and what they've been paying for years is properly accounted for, and that they're not being taken advantage of with any increases coming into an area. Thank you.
Thank you.
My motion stands.
Here, second. You got a second then? Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Item F.
Was this mislabeled on the memorandum? Thank you.
Go ahead.
For the record, my name is Beth Workman. I'm a principal planner in the zoning section, and my time is up. Thank you very much. The next item before you is the planting requirements in airport wildlife hazard zones. So many of you might know that we get on a plan development 3 to 4 deviations every time we have a plan development within 10,000 feet of an airport operations area. These have been going on since 2009, thanks to the Miracle on the Hudson. So we've been granting these deviations to be in line with the airport circular. And so what we've been doing through the deviations is allowing for the littorals, the planted littoral shelves, to be calculated. But then we swap out to native wetland trees. For every 100 littoral, you plant 1 native wetland tree. That upholds our water quality standard so that we do have trees around the lakes, and that it allows for us to be in compliance with the airport operations and the Federal Aviation Administration. So what has happened is there's conventional zoning districts around that are coming in, people are coming in, and they're asking for variances now, because in 10104 in our administrative section for conventional zoned property, the only way to get into compliance with the airport circular is through the variance process. And so that's added an extra layer of hearings and such to come into compliance for public health and safety. And so this amendment before you allows for 10104 to be changed to place an exception to the airport wildlife hazard protection zones and revert you to 10418 subsection 5, which gives the outright code section for if you're within 10,000 feet of airport operations, you follow 10-4185, which is just what I said, the swapping of the littoral plants, the littoral zone, and such. We also changed 10329D4, which is your sloping. Slopes right now in Lee County on any lake, any surface water management lake, must be 6-to-1. This changes it to the 4-to-1, and that's what the 10-4185 allows. So if you're in this section of the code reviewing it, it sends you to 10-4185. And then in 10-4185, we've added the language to the native wetland tree section stating that development located within the airport wildlife hazardous protection zone must substitute 100% of the required number of herbaceous plants to wetland trees. And then, as I mentioned, we have the exception in subsection 3 for your bulkheads So if you're doing geotextile tubes, riprap, the exception for development reverts you right back down to 10.4185. And then the ultimate 10.4185 states the requirements for if you're within 10,000 feet. This is a long time coming. I promised staff I would not go into the Sully-Sullenberg, but we've been doing this since 2009. We've had 3 to 4 deviations coming in on plan developments, and just recently had one come in that was conventional and needed a variance, which was weird that we never had one until now. So I can take any questions.
Any questions?
I have a comment. Good job, thank you. I very much support staff amendments. When there is a deviation that comes in consistently, it just saves everyone's time, and especially in the conventional where you would have a whole other layer of a public hearing process. I think it loosens up staff's time and it doesn't, needless cost to a developer to go through this process.
When we have canned language to approve a deviation, yes.
Appreciate those comments. My question here is, what is the conversion between herbaceous planting and wetland trees? How do you make that conversion?
Well, the conversion stems from, and it's a spawn of 10.418, and let me find the section. It's 10.418D3. So currently, right now, when you come in on any development order, you can substitute 25% of the total number of herbaceous plants to a wetland tree, and one tree may be substituted for 100 herbaceous plants. That's in the code currently. So there's no change in this, we just changed it to 100%, and that's what the deviations are coming in at. So when you request a deviation, it's to 100%.
But it's 100 plants per one tree.
Yes, that is correct.
Is there any concern over a tree's height and glide path?
So when we get into situations, I've had one situation on a project by Page Field where they had, and it was just regular planting of a tree because the height was going to get in the way of the landing. We can move that tree. And in a littoral setting, we haven't had anything with flight path consideration. The airport is involved in every zoning action that we have, reviewing it to make sure they were involved in these amendments as well, because through the years we've had to work with them. I mean, and when the 2009 thing happened, we had to sit down with airport operations and come up with a way to handle a case that was currently under review and development order. So we had to figure out plant size, height, the species of plant that could go in, and we have a list that development order reviewers use to review projects.
Good. Motion?
I recommend approval.
I'd like to add one more thing. This does bring us into compliance with our Lee plan. Our Lee plan currently has the airport hazard in it, and that's the policy 47.2.5. So that kind of rides with it, the land development code changes.
Thank you.
It's all yours, Marcia.
Thank you, Marcia Ellis, for the record. And I have very serious concerns about administratively approving this because living near the airport and being involved in a number of zoning actions, I am always horrified at the water quality diminishment that we get whenever we put in one of these hideous features onto our natural landscape, when we have the option for leaving things as is. So let's talk about the drowning hazard, and let's talk about the reality of the number of people who crash their cars, vulnerable adults, and autistic children that drown in retention ponds in general. Let's also talk about the arsenic that moves from the groundwater into our surface from these ponds, of which are way overbuilt at the airport, where we're literally taking fill in order to save a buck, and we're compromising our water quality north of where our public water supply is. So I am 100% opposed to administratively approving what has legitimately drawn attention to important issues about compatibility with the airport. All right. Maybe the reason that there's not been a conventional zoning action up until now is because we have a situation that is compatible, low density conservation use. When we start bringing in these geotextiles and we start bringing in these hardened features, we're creating hazards in our environment. We don't need to be going down that route. These are diminishments for real people, including our natural resources, our public water supply. And each and every time that one of these deviations are requested, the public should be able to call out the impacts of these deviations and question the compatibility of development that's taking place that's causing us to take a look at it. The reason we're looking at it is because of the incompatibility and the special circumstances that exist in these airports. This is why we have planning and zoning staff, is to make sure and reevaluate what we know are known problems. And I think that it is a shame when more and more attention is being called to the hazards, including the drowning hazards of these ponds, that we're going in the exact opposite direction. We don't know what the future holds. We don't know what the future holds. You have an obligation as a regulatory, in your advisory role, to make sure that these rules that are going onto the books are protective of public health, life, and safety. Okay? That is the number one priority, and that overrides the fiduciary checking of the box and the canned language that apparently is put into these zoning actions. I think that we owe ourselves and the public more.
Thank you for your passion.
Are these, this policy not also dictated by FAA advisory circular?
Yes, sir. So what happens is up until now, the airport reviews these deviations to keep a hold of what we're doing for the granting of the deviation. They'd like to do 100% riprap 2-to-1. Staff has pushed back since 2009 because of the health and safety issue and because of the water quality issue. So as a compromise and through the reviews of these deviations with the airport, we've come to the 4-to-1 lake bank slopes. We used to have 4-to-1 in the code, and we changed it when the sloping was becoming compromised, and so we switched it to 6-to-1. In doing so, then the 4-to-1 is what the airport wants for steep-sided slopes, is what the airport circular states. So they want steep-sided slopes 4-to-1. The FAA has said, yes, this will grant them to be able to get funding for the airport. So yes, the answer is yes.
Anyone else? Motion?
I make a motion to transmit.
Second?
I'll second.
Discussion? In favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next item.
Okay, next item is a very simple cleanup change. This stems from a review of the LDC as it relates to changes to the rules governing the water management district permitting process. And so in going through that exercise, staff identified that there's kind of some ambiguity. We're calling something a chapter when it's really a section. So what we're doing is we're changing the word chapter to section, and we are fixing the last sentence to remove a specific position and rather just require department-wide review of stormwater management where applicable.
Questions? Marcia?
Yeah, I got just one quick comment on this. So specifically, Marcia Ellis for the record, specifically the language strikes the Director of Development Review, and it goes with something more ambiguous, like departments looking at it. Now, why is this an issue? This is an issue because the permits have been granted for maintenance on a number of surface water management projects throughout the district that are coming to light because people are experiencing flooding in their communities, like Corkscrew Estates, for instance, Island Park. All right, so I believe that having more responsible parties rather than a general department look at the surface water management is important in light of the fact that maintenance permits for what should have been engineering permits have become an issue in the community that's raising alarm bells. So I don't really think that muddying the waters is helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion?
Make a motion, please, to transmit.
I'll second.
Discussion? Favor? Aye.
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 Thank you. I am on H.
Yes, that's correct. Item H is relative to existing required street access requirements in the code. Some of you may have been around long enough to know that prior to 2007, there was a discretionary element when it came to required street access for particular projects. That discretionary element was removed, and the only way to deviate from those requirements was through a public hearing zoning action. So staff is proposing some changes to that to add some discretionary ability to deviate from the required street access requirements in section 10.291.3. And that review process would take place pursuant to the process established in LDC section 10.104, which is administrative deviations for development order processes. And ultimately what would happen is a review would occur by DOT staff and by development services staff and by the Department of Public Safety to evaluate a deviation request from required street access provisions of the LDC and render a decision either in the affirmative or the negative. Ultimately, a negative decision would allow an applicant to avail themselves of a public hearing zoning action to pursue that further with the hearing examiner. But this establishes some discretionary capability for department staff to review these projects as they come in the door and they're not able to meet those street access requirements.
Any questions? I have some. Page 1 of 4.
One of 4, or?
My apologies, my apologies. Yeah, no, I'm fine on this. All right. Any comments? Motion?
Does Marcia have a comment?
Oh, yeah.
Well, please, Marcia.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. It's kind of the same old. Thank you, Marcia Ellis, for the record. And so we're just going to kind of continue on this theme. All right. If the idea is to remove the public from the planning process and take away the voice of people in their neighborhood to be able to speak up if there's an administrative action to put in a giant multi-residence that's going to flood them out and cause an unsafe condition on the road, good job. That's what you've accomplished here. So I've seen discretionary movement to make things more and offer a path for administrative approval on water, on lakes that are a hazard and take away our water quality protections, and now we're talking about access on traffic. All right? So if that's the goal, then I suppose that is a mission accomplished. If this body values public input, values public insight, values hearing from people that do things like find major structural flaws in the engineering of, let's say, our terminal, all right, and appreciates having additional sets of eyes and don't want the public to be unhappy with what happens in their community, then reconsider, certainly. Have some discussion about what the impacts are going to be from these discretionary administrative approvals. And continue to allow the public voice to bring these things forward. All right? Already we know that there has been a lot of preemptive movement at the legislative level, and we're feeling those consequences. You were hearing it today. We certainly want to see the local voice. We want to have local rule in our community. We don't want to have preemptive things forced upon us. It makes for a very unhappy public. I just would ask that staff reconsider this direction of these administrative approvals and these discretionary powers. Those are the voices of the public you're taking away.
Thank you. Anything further?
I have a comment. There's a lot of discussion about affordability in housing, and I think some of the processes that are required, like in this case, if the state would not allow you to have a second access point, the requirement to go through a public hearing process to get such a deviation, it just brings up the price of every unit that is being sold in that house. So if the process would yield the same result, I am very much in support of administrative approvals like this to keep our affordability down in the county.
I agree. Anyone else? Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve as proposed.
I second.
Motion, second, discussion. In favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Item I is an Indigo,
Good
development order.
afternoon. Brian Roberts, Planner, Planning Section, Lee County Community Development. I have item I, the last item today. It's the Public Projects Coordinator. Existing language regarding development order approval for capital improvement projects is contained in Chapter 2, Article 10 of the Land Development Code. It's outdated. It references the Public Works Department that doesn't exist in Lee County currently. This amendment will delete Chapter 2, Article 10, and replace that process with an alternative process for development order review of publicly funded projects, capital improvement projects, and public use type projects. It does that through amendments to Chapter 10 and the definitions. It adds a definition of a public projects coordinator, and it modifies the definition and kind of outlines the responsibilities of the public project coordinator and their duties and the powers of that position.
Anybody? A question that I have is, this is applicable to public projects? And
It lists the specific projects in the definition. I didn't go through the actual definition here. Let me grab it here real quick. I lost my place. What it lists here is a development review process for capital improvement, municipal services, taxing benefits, Lee County Sheriff's Department, and other projects that have board-approved development agreements located in unincorporated Lee County.
I saw that, and is there a way that we can similarly adopt these streamlinings for private sector projects?
Well, this is is replacing the Chapter 2 that went through the Public Works Department. The private sector has the separate development review process through development services. And that's the process that the private sector has traditionally gone through, while the CIP projects and these projects have gone through the separate process.
Sometimes it's good for the cook to eat his own cooking.
It goes through the same review. There's no change to what's looked at. The same regulations are applied to these projects that are applied to the private development side. The Chapter 10 requirements, Chapter 34 requirements are reviewed.
If that's the case, why is there a separate section for that?
It just streamlines the process, and it keeps the reviews separate as they were previously.
Streamlines the process for the applicant, which in this case is the public entity?
Whoever the applicant may be, yeah.
Pardon me?
Whoever the applicant may be, yeah. It has Sheriff's Department's projects. It has the taxing benefit unit is a separate entity that applies for projects sometimes as well. But it is the government agencies. Yes.
So they track the same checks and balances?
Yes.
If that's the case, do then the public projects get expedited, or? How,
There's not an expediting, but as the public projects are planned, it allows for greater coordination of those public projects during the planning process. So when you're looking at a CIP process for a roadway project, you're going to have continuity of the planning through that process with the review at the development order stage.
okay? Any other questions?
Motion to approve?
Thank you, Don. Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, did we have public comment on that last one?
Marcia's declining that opportunity on this item. Thank you for that. I think that's it. All right, well, VLPA, thank you for a yeoman's work today. It was good to have all of us here. Grateful for your service. And motion to adjourn?
Make that motion?
We are adjourned.